Casium believes every young athlete deserves a shot at greatness. By making data analytics accessible and easy, they provide a new way for coaches and athletes to improve their game. Casium's digital scoring app, all-in-one stats, and chart software enable teams to quickly and easily find new ways to strategize and harness the power of data. Join Casium in revolutionizing the world of youth sports with tools that make a difference. Schedule a software demo or sign up today at Casium.com. Casium, where sports technology sparks victory.
Hey, what's going on? I'm Ryan Glick, co-founder and CEO of Groove. And if you're a real estate professional, I have something I think you're going to be interested in. We've developed a platform that's transforming the way deals are prospected and managed in the real estate world. With Groove, you can organize real estate data in one place and share real estate deals with just one click. Join other real estate pros and reclaim up to 90% of your time. Head over to letsgroove.com/signup and start your free trial today.
Do you ever ask yourself, how would my life be different if I had made different choices? Would I be happier? More wealthy? Here's a humorous novel that explores that question, venturing back to that magical time in the early 90s when grunge was taking over big hair bands. It was just when our hero, Amy Gare, began to face the real world. You Hawkeye fans just might enjoy the setting as well. Goodbye Def Leppard, I'll Miss Those Jeans by Steph Kramer can be found on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and it's free for Kindle Unlimited subscribers. Well, we'd like to welcome everybody to a special edition of Iowa Postgame with none other than myself, Corey Brada, and the guy that makes this happen, Coach Don Patterson. And these are unique shows, Don. I know you and Kyle spent the better part of 2+ hours yesterday talking about Iowa's win against Troy. But, Don, can you give people an idea of the perspective that you're able to garnish just from having another day to look back at the game? Of course, you're in Kinnick during these home games. Can you give us an idea of the benefits of having an occasional Sunday show?
Sure, Corey, I'd be happy to. Coming from the stadium right after the game, I have a pretty good idea of how the game all played out, of course, but it always helps to get another look. And for that matter, to be able to run the play back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. The 3-hour plus TV tape probably took me about 5 hours to go through today, just to be sure that I knew for sure what I was seeing. And Of course, it takes a little time to write things down too. But the bottom line is I have a lot better idea on Sunday night as to what happened on Saturday afternoon than I do on Saturday right immediately after the game.
So I've got some notes because, of course, as I promised everybody, I did go back and watch the game this afternoon from start to finish. Took about 2 pages worth of notes that I want to run through. Some I think were probably discussed yesterday, and some of them maybe not, and some of them that maybe you noticed when you watched the TV tape. A couple things that stood out to me, Don, and again, I know you spent 2 hours talking about the game. I'm sure we're going to look ahead to the big Floyd of Rosedale battle next Saturday night on NBC, so we can get to that. But I do want to kind of just give a bit of a brief overview of my overall takeaways. And I did call in briefly during the show with Kyle yesterday because I was able to catch part of that second half. But after watching the game from start to finish today, Don, I'm not really changing my tune. I still think the running game is about where Iowa needs it to be. Of course, you're always trying to button things up with consistency. The passing game is still very much a work in progress. I think the numbers that we saw from Kade McNamara, although impressive on paper, were kind of what I expected. I said going into the game that I thought we might get a fool's gold type of performance. And that doesn't mean that Cade's not going to be better next week against Minnesota. I hope he is. But I'm saying I don't know that him throwing for 80% through the air or whatever it was is much of an indicator of substantial progress, especially against a Troy defense that I'm hovering around top 100 in total defense 2 games in. So there's that. I think on the defensive side, clearly things to clean up on the back end. I'm curious to get your take on the cornerback position opposite Jermari. I think people have been a little unfair to TJ Hall. And people, Don, here's the deal. You and I are not going to be able to be people are not going to take us as seriously when it comes to TJ as other players, because you do have a connection to TJ Hall and you're close to TJ and to his dad. But I know you're as objective as they come, even with a good friend in Kirk Ferentz. So I am anxious to get your take on TJ's performance and how much of the issues over the top came down to TJ and how much of it came down to just going up against a really above average, G5 skill position player. So I guess let's start with the rushing attack, Don. Kaleb Johnson now, another week in the books of college football. 3 weeks in, he leads the country in total yards. He was our RTI Threads player of the game this week with 175 yards on 25 carries, 2 touchdowns. And I've been on the record over the last week and said, Don, I was wrong heading into the season. And I'm happy to admit that. What I had said going into the season is I thought that Kamari would still be the number 1 guy if it's not Le'Shawn. And I've kind of got all of that flipped. I just didn't see the consistency out of Kaleb Johnson through the first 2 seasons. And then I caught wind that he was going to miss that first game for some off-season stuff. And it gave me the feel like, I don't know that he's doing everything he needs to be doing right now to be that bell cow. Something obviously clicked during fall camp, and we were hearing buzz that he had been getting better, especially during the latter half of fall camp. But did you expect him to be approaching the 500-yard mark 3 games into the season?
Well, that's a pleasant surprise, I'd say. The word that came to mind for me when I found out he was going to have to miss the first half of game 1, maybe, and I think in the past, people have made this observation, maybe fairly or unfairly, the impression that maybe Kaleb feels a little bit entitled. That's the word I've heard people use. I don't know for sure that that's the case, but one thing that is obvious, he's a more determined runner now than he was last year or the year before. Yards after contact is showing up more often now than before. I was impressed with him a week ago. He was quick to give a lot of credit to his teammates. He said all the right things. He seemed genuinely grateful for the opportunity to play running back at Iowa and to have so many teammates he can really rely on. So I thought this is not just a new and improved runner, but this is an older, more mature player that maybe understands team concepts better now than he did a year ago. I give Kaleb credit for being more mature than when he's maybe shown as a younger person. That's the way it's supposed to work, of course. And I think it's worked that way for Kaleb. He looks like a more complete player now than he ever has. And and he still has that deceptive speed, of course, because he does have a slightly longer stride than what people realize. That means even though his feet aren't turning over maybe as fast as you might think, he's covering ground a little bit quicker because of slightly longer stride length.
Yeah, what do you think of? I mean, what do you attribute this to, Don? Is it 90% line? Is it 50% line, 50% improved player? When I've watched these first 3 games, and I think we need to all acknowledge the obvious. 2 of these games are against very much inferior opponents. One is an FCS opponent, good FCS program, part of a good conference, but not a power at the FCS level. It's an FCS team. And the other one is a Troy team that's in rebuild mode.
Right.
Now, Kaleb did it against Iowa State, and I think that needs to be acknowledged. Looked really good. And by the way, he missed the first half of the Illinois State game. That should also be acknowledged. But he's still got things to prove, Don. They haven't been on the road, have not played a Big Ten game yet. He's got to do this back to back to back in the Big Ten Conference. So there should still be plenty of motivation. But man, it seems like he's running through big, gaping holes. And I give him credit for his, like you said, his stride and he's playing through contact a lot better than I've ever seen him play in the past. And if people missed the press conference with Liddell Betts on, I believe it was Wednesday morning, go over on the YouTube channel after this is over and listen to that. Because I asked him about Kaleb's ability to break tackles, and Liddell agreed with me. Hey, the game against Iowa State Saturday, second half was really the first time we've seen Kaleb do that in a game setting, and that's encouraging, and I saw that carry over to Saturday, Don.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he gets credit for, even though he's not a juker, not a change in direction runner, he does have pretty darn good vision. When he hits the hole, and to the credit of our offensive line, he has had some good running lanes. It'll be a little tougher to do that over the entire season, of course, because tougher D lines are up ahead, tougher front sevens are up ahead, starting with Minnesota, incidentally. But he's been able to make a decision on the run as to whether to make a move out to the outside of the field or maybe cut back against the grain. In general, his sense of where to run has been pretty much spot on. I don't think you can really question a lot of his decision making when he does clear the line of scrimmage. It's been pretty darn good. The one thing he can still improve on, his legs are a little bit exposed downfield. You'll see some defensive backs just chop him down, so to speak, because he's tall. And the next step for him would be, if he can learn how to do it, is learn how to run with a flipper, as Hayden would call it. If you got contact coming off your right side, don't be afraid to drop that arm down and rip your way through that tackle. Right now, he's too exposed in his legs. Typically, he does get chopped down if a defender has a decent angle on him. A defensive back in general has been able to, it almost looks like he's being blocked to the ground. You know what I'm talking about, when a lot of tacklers have run through his thigh area or slightly above the knee. But, there aren't any perfect runners out there. He's a pretty darn good guy to have carrying the ball. What's it averaging out now? 25 times a game, I guess, last couple of games. And that's a lot of carries for anybody, especially in the month of September, because those are warm days. And incidentally, we got good support from some other runners again, one of which I know is near and dear to your heart, and that would be Jazz. Jazz started off. I realized they were pretty demoralized at that point, but he looked good, really. Every time he carried the ball, he looked good. And the next thing you knew, he's in the end zone with another explosive play. Incidentally, I think I charted 4 explosive plays in the running game alone. Not many in the passing game, maybe only 1, I'm not sure. But I do know explosive runs, 39 by Kaleb, 33 by Kaleb, 29 by number 28, and 39 yards by Jazz. So we got good mileage out of all 3 of those guys. Obviously, they all had explosive plays. And, of course, there were any number of other plays involving Kaleb in particular that were in the high teens even. I know we had 1 or 2 that were up around the 18, 19-yard gain. And those are, of course, good gains, too. They just don't hit that standard of 20 yards per play.
Yeah, Caden Weegan with a nice 15-yard catch. Boy, I'll tell you, this regardless of the results, like I don't know I haven't even looked at the team passing efficiency rankings right now. I do know this. Minnesota, as of now, 3 weeks into the season, Don, they're a top 5 total defense. Now, that's not going to hold true, but they're top 5 in total defense, folks. Top 20 in rush defense. So this is going to be a challenge. And I mentioned it yesterday that say what you want about Minnesota being down, and they did lose to North Carolina at home, but that was not due to the defense. That game was in the teens, and North Carolina, Mac Brown, and the Tar Heels found a way out of there with a win. But that is going. I'm excited for that, Don. I am excited to see this Iowa offense tested again. Now, as it relates to the passing game, my big thing that I've got in my notes, Don, is, as I mentioned, Cade, to me, the verdict's still very much out. We can get to the Brendan Sullivan's usage in the red zone here in a little bit. But I think the big thing that is encouraging to me 3 weeks into the season is Tim Lester continues to get more and more receivers involved. And that's something that has been lacking. And there's so many things that have lacked over the years, over the last 7 seasons. But how about getting a number of different receivers involved? Jacob Gill, Don, when is the last time we've said about any Iowa receiver, here's a guy who is trustworthy, and I'm not talking about off the field. Obviously, I'm not on the field, catching footballs, running routes, a guy who you're going to be able to rely on. And he is that. He hasn't, by my recollection, hasn't had a single drop. He catches everything thrown his way. He runs crisp routes. He's the best receiver on this team, hands down. And everybody was freaking out week 1 after Reese Vanderzee and his big performance. Has Reese had, one catch since then? He's a true freshman. Right. Jacob Gill is the best receiver on this roster right now, Don.
Yes, he is. I think he's got a good overall game. I think he takes his blocking very seriously. And to my knowledge, he has not had a drop yet. And he has an idea what to do with the ball after the catch, too. So that's all good. You mentioned receivers with their first catch of the year. Let me start off with Weegan. Nice run after catch. That play, I think he caught the ball at about 15, but it was a gain of 33. So you're reminded all over again. We said this about Caleb Brown. We can say the same thing about Weegan. We got to find a way to get those guys the ball in space and then give them a chance to do something with it. That's a prime example. Weegan has good wheels. He does. 33 yards on that play. That was 2nd and 6 at the 40. That took us down to the 7-yard line. And I believe we scored a couple of 3 plays later. So that was the same drive that involved the naked throughout the stringer for the touchdown. So that was good to see. And not to mention, correct me if I'm wrong, is it pronounced Bowie or Bowie? Bowie?
Yeah.
Bowie had his first catch, I do believe.
Yes, he did.
And someone else as well. Who was it?
Caleb Brown had his first catch.
Yes, Caleb. Let's talk about that play. The beauty of that play, it was against zone. He settled in the soft spot in the zone. And when he caught it, you remember what he did, Corey? As we say, he turned and he went north-south. He went straight up the field, and he had an idea where the tacklers were, and he didn't dance around. He went with some determination too. As I recall, he had a few yards after contact as well, and he protected the ball well. They were trying to get the ball out at that point in the game, and he wasn't about to give it up. So that's good to see too. So there's a couple of guys talking about Weegan and talking about Caleb. Let's get him the ball, give him a chance to run. The ball might even be thrown behind the line or shortly, just slightly downfield, but just give him a chance to work in space and make yards after the catch. And those short throws, of course, can turn into longer gains as long as you have a guy catching it that knows what to do with the ball.
All right, folks, we've got some people that want to chat. And if you are new to the show, you can call us 515-635-1601, or you can click the StreamYard link. It's found in the description. I'll also throw it up here in the live chat. If you want to call in, very simple. Ask a question of Coach Patterson or myself. But, of course, Coach Patterson is even my go-to. So, again, that's in the live chat and in the description. We'll go to our first caller. We've got Landon on hold. Landon, thank you for calling our Iowa Smokehouse. Landon's gone. Gone. Wow. Landon waited on hold for a while, Don, and then he disappeared. Our call-in line is presented by Iowa Smokehouse this evening. Why does this comment thing keep popping up? All right, let's go to Don, can I get you to lower your camera just a little bit?
Absolutely.
Put it down a little bit so that I can see. Okay. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Are you wearing cyclone colors this evening, Don?
Maybe I am, but it had nothing to do with anything other than I haven't worn this shirt in a while, and I decided I wanted to wear red. So,
You look like
don't read anything into it.
Don, you look like Waldo. You remember the Where's Waldo books?
Does he always wear red or something?
Doesn't he always have stripes? Let's get Alex in here. Iowa Smokehouse column. Alex, doesn't Waldo always wear white and red stripes?
Striped red, yeah. Except he's got the glasses. He's all he's missing is the hat.
There you go.
Well,
he
I'll
did have
never wear that
cowboy
shirt
hat
again.
last season. Maybe he can bring it back.
Okay.
Good evening,
How you
gentlemen.
doing,
How are you
Alex?
all? I'm doing pretty good. I'm just wanted to hop on. I got to get going to bed here. 2 a.m. comes a little early for me. So I rewatched the game, and I came on last night with, some initial thoughts. And after rewatching the game, and this is a question for Don, is that we know Kade cannot throw a 50-yard pass. I mean, we saw that against Iowa State. He barely made it to the 10-yard line. And I understand Kirk's side of it, where we don't want to throw up a Hail Mary, have it turn over, and Troy could get another, God forbidding, a pick six, or maybe kick a field goal to go in, really feeling good about themselves. So at that point, for me, we know Sullivan has a better arm. He at least has the arm strength to get it further down the field. Do you put him in for that series? You run it once, and if you get a decent chunk of yards, like, okay, maybe the last play we chuck it up and see what we can have happen, rather than just kind of sitting on something.
You're talking about with a minute left in the first half?
No, that was when Troy, I think, got that touchdown, and there was only a few seconds. Yeah, there might have been a minute left or something like that.
There was a minute. There was exactly a minute.
Exactly.
That last series before they went in.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute.
Had one timeout, by the way. Can we just establish they had one timeout?
Correct. I did flash back on the fact the defense under Coach Brazier would sometimes feel frustrated because if the defense burned a timeout, Coach Fryer was not really happy with them. In his mind, it shouldn't be necessary because we need to save those timeouts for the possibility that we need to drive shortly before the half and have the benefit of 3 timeouts. Now, every now and then we'd burn a timeout, but bottom line, we'd burned a couple of timeouts already. I believe one was on the offense, one on the defense, as I recall. And now we only have 1 timeout. The ball's on the 25. But here's the way I would look at it. That would mean, just to pick a number, if we could gain 40 yards in that last minute of play, that would leave us with a 53-yard field goal. 40 yards would put us on the other 35. We'd back up 8 yards for the kick, and of course add in the end zone. So that's a 53-yarder. I'm pretty sure Corey feels like I do about Drew. I'd be willing to bet you he'd make it from 53 yards, and maybe we can scramble and pick up 3 points to go in at halftime, better situated than what we were. But we only had 1 timeout, and I know what Kirk's concern was when I realized for sure that Kirk wasn't going to make any real effort to go down the field. I knew then he's very comfortable with the fact that it's a 1-score game at halftime. He has great confidence that we're going to reel him into the second half. The game in some ways reminded me a lot of the Illinois State game. I think as the game wound on down, we had a bigger and bigger advantage in the offensive and defensive lines. I think we wore them down on both sides. And their protection had more trouble as the game went on. And for that matter, they had more difficulty stopping our run game in the second half too. So I was confident that Kirk felt we're down by 4. It's a 1-score game. The thing I'm not going to allow to happen is for us to be down by 11 at the half. And let's face it, if we take some foolish chances in that last minute of play, then it's very conceivable we would be down by 7 or 11, depending on what happened if we gave up the ball way too soon. Having said all that, I think there's still another option for us. Here's what we used to do sometimes back in the day. Go ahead and present like you're trying to score a touchdown, By that I mean get in some type of spread formation, force the defense to deploy all over the field, and now there are bigger seams in the defense that give you a chance to hunt and peck your way down the field. And again, like I'm saying, I'm not even talking about scoring a touchdown. I'm just talking about getting in field goal range. And it is entirely possible you can cover 40 yards in 60 seconds and be in position for a last second field goal at the end of the half. That's another option for us going forward. We chose not to do that. It all worked out great because sure enough, we had worn them down to some extent at halftime. In the second half, we exerted our will even more so than in the first. That's
so
another,
go ahead. I had another question, but if you wanted to finish up, go ahead.
No, that's really all I had to say. I realize it sounds like I'm defending Kirk at that point, and I'll be the first to tell you there were any number of times when I got to Western Illinois, we'd never pass up a chance to run 2-minute offense with a minute left in the half. And there were all kinds of games where we didn't just put up field goals, we put up touchdowns with less than a minute. And one season we had, I don't know, at least half a dozen drives at the end of first half or end of game that were not just for field goals, they were all for touchdowns. Average drive was something like 84 yards and 9 plays, and it took 70 or 60 or 50 seconds. If you know exactly what you're doing with 2-minute offense, you can get that done. You see that demonstrated, of course, on Sunday with the NFL. Some of the best quarterbacks, they know exactly what they're doing. And one thing I always emphasized with my offense is understand this, and this applies especially at the end of the game, but even at the end of the half, it still applies. A good example is yesterday. We're down by 4 with a minute left, and you can approach it the same way as you would the end of the game. If you're toward the end of the game, and now you got to drive to win the game, it's a one-score game, one of the things you reinforce with the quarterback before he goes on the field, oh, by the way, if you don't understand this, then you're not going to play for us. And that simply means possession of the ball means everything. I'll say that again, everything. It means you don't ever throw it up for grabs, because if you lose the ball, you lose the game. That makes sense to you, Alex?
Yeah.
Well, that certainly applies at the end of the half, right? Because we're down by 4. Same thing.
The one pushback I would have is at the end of the half, you still have a whole another 30 minutes to play. At the end of the game, that's it. You have one chance.
Correct. But the reason I say that applies to our first half. If we're down by 11 at half, I promise you're nervous, and so is everybody else in the stadium.
I was nervous. I was nervous down 4. So,
well, down by 4 sounds one hell of a lot better than down by 11.
Yeah, so I see both sides of it. I was just kind of, because you were an offensive coordinator and a head coach, so maybe getting your 2 cents on that too. But another question for you is and Corey, you can chime in on this if you know anything, but what's going on with Kaleb Brown? Obviously, he had the 1-game suspension due to the OWI, and then he has been on the field. He finally caught his first pass in this game, and then he had a chance against Iowa State, but Cade underthrew him. So we talk about Jacob Gill, who is a great addition to this wide receiver room, who's got so far has been the most consistent and our best wide receiver option. Why not? But then we threw out another wide receiver, Howard, out there, who we haven't seen yet, and we barely have seen Kaleb Brown. So I know Kirk always preaches, do the little things. We got to do the little things right, and understanding that. So. But also on the same side, he's probably one of our, top 3 athletes specifically on offense. Why are we not having him out there, and contributing? Because we saw what he could do, specifically in the later half of the season when he saw the field more. He was able to, take this, corpse of an offense and have, give it some sort of pulse.
Well, and keep in mind, let me just say this: keep in mind, Jacob Gill wasn't here. Caden Weegan was a year younger. Dayton Howard was a true freshman. Jarrett Bowie was a true freshman. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm not telling you you're wrong that Kaleb Brown may be one of their best athletes at receiver, but they like Dayton Howard and they like Terrell Washington. He's another guy that's getting snaps, and he had a catch yesterday. So I don't know. I push back more on that, Alex, than I do on the quarterback conversation, because to me, Kaleb Brown didn't impress me all that much last year. I know he made plays in the second half of the season, but he also had a lot of drops. And there was a lot of hype around him. He was an Ohio State transfer. I don't know. I like numbers at receiver, Don. I don't know if that's... By the way, Kaleb Brown and Dayton Howard are totally different types of receivers. So I think that probably has... I mean, Dayton Howard's like 6'5". So I'm guessing some of that is situational, Don. I don't know if you tracked how many, what situations this guy was in versus this guy.
Well, I do know this. Talking about number 3 and number 21, those guys impress me with what they're able to do after the catch. And I say this, maybe Kaleb in particular has suspect hands. Well, I'm okay with giving him the ball on a fly sweep or giving him an easy catch out of the backfield on a swing route, whatever. Just getting the ball in space and give him a chance to prove that he's more explosive than most of the guys we have on our team. I suspect that he'd be able to prove that. Now, obviously, he hasn't earned the same level of trust maybe as some other receivers have. And that's on him. He's got to find a way to demonstrate even in practice that I deserve more playing time.
I guess what I'm saying is, okay, we want to talk about speed, then Caden Weegen's the guy for speed. We want to talk about hands, then Jacob Gill is the guy that has hands. If you want to talk about size, then we can talk about Dayton Howard and Reese Vanderzee. So
I would be willing to bet you that Kaleb Brown is not too far behind Weegen in terms of speed. He's an explosive athlete. You saw that on that one catch. He turned up the hill. He's pretty sudden.
Yeah, but I think
you're talking about a guy that's seen wide receivers for 40 years. He's pretty sudden.
Okay.
I'd like to give him a chance.
You also
get him on side by side in a 40, see who's faster.
I don't know that Weegen would beat him, but it would be a close race, I think.
But I'm just saying, I'm not saying he's not fast. I'm just simply saying what puts him ahead above Caden or these other guys. When
I'm on Caden to catch more balls too. I mentioned 2 guys in particular. We're talking about both of them.
But you bring back and Corey, to your point, is we bring back a wide receiver from last year's squad that has shown that, yes, later half of the season, he was showed to be somewhat of a spark for that offense that was just putrid. And now Jacob Gill, I think is a great add to that. Reese Vanderzee, a true freshman, outside, you even said it, outside the Illinois State game, he's had 1 catch. He's a true freshman. Howard kid, I can't remember his first name. I know you said it. He's a true freshman too, right?
No, he's a redshirt freshman.
Redshirt freshman. So, and I don't remember seeing him at all last year. And then Jacob Bowie, who is a true freshman. So
redshirt freshman.
It's what?
Redshirt freshman. He's a redshirt freshman as well.
Freshman. But it's mind-boggling to me that we have a guy who's been in the system for now 2 years, and he's still not seeing the field where the talent is there. We have seen the talent last year where, yeah, he may be more of a gadget type of receiver. He may not be your X. He could be a Y type of wide receiver, or he could be your slot wide receiver who you get him in the flat and then just let his elusiveness take over. But we still haven't seen that.
I guess this show is predicated on me speaking my mind. So I'm going to do it right now. Am I missing something? When did Kaleb Brown prove himself as some huge spark last year? Iowa's offense sucked from game 1 to game 14, Alex.
What other wide receiver actually did anything last year?
But that's
Seth Anderson had stone hands. Speaking of Seth Anderson, I said this yesterday. Corey, you weren't here. Seth Anderson is Keegan Johnson. Seth Anderson 2022. Keegan Johnson had a soft tissue injury the entire year, and when the transfer portal opened, he was gone. Seth Anderson is going to do the same.
Okay, well, Kaleb Brown. I just want to make this abundantly clear. Kaleb Brown had 22 catches for 215 yards last year. So
name the other wide receiver that was closest to him, not tight end, wide receiver.
Wait, Alex, why do we care what he did versus other receivers last year? Last year. They didn't have Jacob Gill. They didn't have Reese Vanderzee. That's what I'm saying. Like, this is a different room. He's got to compete against better guys. because they got a guy in Tim Lester.
Do we think Reese Vandersee and the other guys are as good, if not better than him? I might challenge. I challenge it. I think Jacob Gill's better. I will give you that. I think he has proven that he is better. Reese Vandersee, he's a taller guy. He had 2 spectacular catches for touchdowns in the Illinois State game, and he's had 1 since then. And he had 1 in this Troy game, hit him square in the numbers, and he dropped it. Okay, so, I mean, if you want to talk about Kaleb Brown and his hands, there's that.
Actually, that particular ball was thrown behind him.
I mean, we could.
It was a drop, but it was thrown behind him.
So it's, I want to see him more. I want him because of what he was able to help with this offense last year with Deacon Hill as our quarterback with no true wide receiver threat. He was our only option. Both tight ends went down, too. He was the only one that we could use to, open up this offense. And now he's not getting a shot. Now, if there's other off the field or practice things that's happening that, doesn't let us in on, that's one thing.
He did get an OWI and was suspended game 1, and that sets you behind because other guys got to like Reese Vandersee got to play. Kaleb Brown didn't, and that's on Kaleb Brown for screwing up in the offseason.
And that's one reason I talked about level of trust. He has to earn that. And part of that does tie into the OWI. But, Corey, let me just take you back 1 week. There was one guy last weekend that took the top off that defense. His name was Kaleb Brown. And if we'd have made a good throw, he would have been the hero of the game very conceivably because he was open over the top. Correct or not?
You're correct. I'm not, and I'm not arguing that he's not explosive. I'm simply saying, like Reese, you were talking about Reese Vandersee's one good performance, Alex. Reese in week 1 against Illinois State doubled Kaleb Brown's touchdown count for all of last season. Reese did that in 1 game. Kaleb had all of 1 touchdown last season. And I
jumped on here. You were talking about we played Illinois State and FCS and then Troy, not a good. So now you're kind of doubling back.
I'm not doubling back. They played crap opponents last year too. And Kaleb Brown didn't do anything.
Kaleb Brown didn't see the field last year until I think someone's week 6 or week 5. So he barely saw the field even early on. So, okay. But I
get ripped because there was a time here just a couple weeks ago where I was kind of like, I'm not a hater on the Kalebs. I think some people think I hate Kaleb Johnson and I hate Kaleb Brown. Don, you got me to admit something. Let me get you to admit something. Kaleb Brown had a problem with drops last year. Wrong, right or wrong?
True. Not reliable enough.
Now everybody had a problem with drops under Brian Ferentz's and Kelton Copeland's tenure. I hate to say that. They did. I mean, there were very few. Like, Brandon Smith had pretty good hands.
Well, part of the problem is we needed to throw a more catchable ball at times.
Well, that may be true, Don.
It wasn't all on the receivers.
That may be true. However, I've seen, Jacob Gill made a couple of catches yesterday. One where he stretched out. I mean, Cade's not throwing the best balls.
That's correct.
Was it Luke Lachey caught one at his feet yesterday? And I'm just seeing guys that are better pass catchers now already. I'm already seeing that under Tim Lester's watch, and maybe give some credit to John Budmeyer in that as well. That's fine. I have no problem doing that. But I'm just thinking back to the receivers of the Brian era and the Kelton era. I remember Tracy having problems with drops. I remember Smith Marset being fast, and I remember people saying that, boy, the guy could just catch, but he's really fast, but if he could just catch. Even Nico Ragaini had stretches of time where he'd struggle with drops. You mentioned Keegan Johnson. I mean, I don't remember Arlen Bruce seemed like his career was a flash in the pan, but.
Well, I mean, he didn't make it to the end zone. He had money on the Iowa game, remember? Allegedly. Let's.
Good conversation. Anything else, Alex, before I let you slide?
Just a couple of things that I had written down. I think, obviously, with the 3 explosive plays that Troy had, I think, everyone's kind of if you follow Chris Hassel on Twitter, he's like, oh, we're in an upside-down year. Iowa's let up 3 explosive plays. That's the most in the FBS. It's just we've had LeVar Woods. We have Phil Parker. They've had elite teams, elite units for the past 3 to 4 years. Let's cut them a little bit more slack than, okay, yeah, they let up some explosive plays. Obviously, one against Iowa State that ended up, two really that really ended up losing the game for us. But you know what? Hey, come a little slack. We need to trust Phil Parker to have this. He's a defensive backs coach too. He will put the right guys out there, get them right. And LeVar Woods, Reese-Dakin, is a freshman. He will coach him up and say, this is why we can't have those types of punts. Obviously, we don't have a gunner. Cooper DeJean's missed because he was that guy who can get down there as quick as he could to down the ball. Maybe we put in, one of our faster guys like Weegan or Caleb Brown to be that gunner to storm down there, make the guy call the fair catch, even if it's not going to be down at the 5, but get him there so that way if the ball does go over his head, we down it at the 5 or inside the 5. So that was about it. So I think the overreaction with the defense and the special teams, just, you know what? We haven't let up a special teams touchdown in like 10 years, if that. So I think we need to tone it down just a little bit. Trust LeVar Woods, trust this defense, trust Phil Parker. If we lit up explosive plays against Minnesota, I mean, you talk Max Brosmer, the quarterback. I mean, obviously they have Darius Taylor in the backfield. I was done really well at shutting down the run, but if we let up explosive plays against Minnesota, then maybe we can start, I wouldn't say panicking, but maybe start reacting a little more to letting up explosive plays if that happens against Minnesota.
Well, Alex, I appreciate your call, sir, and good stuff.
So someone want to know, I work at 2 a.m. I have to get up at 2 a.m. I have to be to work by 3, so that's what I do.
That Nevada game from a couple of years back was right in your wheelhouse.
It was on a weekend, so it was like whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, you're just getting ready for your day at 2 a.m. That's when the Nevada game was wrapping up. So, anyways, Alex, thank you for the call, sir.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Don, here's a quick trivia question.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard you bring this game up yesterday. So a couple of years back, it's funny, we talk about Iowa not inserting a backup quarterback under almost any circumstances. And we bring up a certain game in Kinnick, and the opponent was Nevada, and Iowa outscored Nevada 27-0 in that game.
Right.
And ironically enough, we bring that game up. Who did Minnesota play this week, Don?
Nevada.
What was the final score of that game, Don?
27-0.
Isn't that ironic?
That's familiar, doesn't it?
It's very interesting, the irony there. So
let's not forget, you remember who Nevada opened with? I'm sorry, played in game 2.
Troy.
Nevada's actually played 4 games, right?
They played Troy game 1.
That was game 2.
Okay.
Go make it look.
Game 2 for them. Troy's game 1.
Right.
Yes.
And that was a game that Troy came within a hair of winning. So my only point of bringing it up, I think it's safe to say that Troy and Nevada, they played a 2-point game. Troy failed on a 2-point play. That's why they lost the game. Otherwise, it would have been a tie in regulation. And that same team that was able to beat Troy went to Minnesota and lost decisively. So my only point is Minnesota is going to be a challenge. It will be a challenge. We're going to have to certainly clean up our mistakes to have the kind of chance to beat Minnesota that we want to have. I don't doubt that we can beat them, but we have to clean up our mistakes. And I can promise you those coaches and players are going to do everything they can to get those things done.
All right. That was a really good call, and I have some things to add to it here in a second. And then we've got a couple more callers here that want to chat. Before we get to our callers, yes, you can call our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line by means of the phone number, 515-635-1601, or via StreamYard. We thank Iowa Smokehouse for being a part of the show and sponsoring the show, sponsoring the call line all year long. They've been doing this for quite some time. Show your appreciation for this unique brand and this Iowa company. Visit iowasmokehouse.com and get 15% off your total order, whether it's their meat sticks, their jerky. A buddy of mine just ordered their jalapeno meat sticks. Those were really tasty. And I've got some of their bacon ketchup still in my fridge. Their barbecue sauce I'm all out of. Got to get more of that. They've got everything you need for game day or any day. Visit iowasmokehouse.com. Tasting is believing. Use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your total order. And Brad Van Meter, good friend of mine down in Des Moines, down on Fleur Drive. I visited Brad here not that long ago, and I know his whole team is excited for this season. And Brad will get you excited for insurance. I know that's hard to do sometimes. Insurance is not something people like to talk about, but how about saving some money and getting great service from people that care about you and a team full of Hawkeye fans? Give him a call, 515-256-6480, or visit Brad online at bradvanmeter.com. Again, the number, 515-256-6480. Brad Van Meter at State Farm down in Des Moines. Don, Alex brought up Kaleb Brown and, talked a little bit about snaps. Do you know how many snaps Kaleb Brown had? I didn't count them when I was watching.
I'm not sure either.
It feels like he's been on the field a little more than maybe that call led us to believe. He's maybe not been thrown to a lot, but he's been on the field over the last couple of weeks since he's been back.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many snaps he's had. Not very many, that's safe to say. But as we know, sometimes the guy's out there more than you realize, and if he wasn't targeted, you might not notice.
Yeah. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse line. We'll go to James. James, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up? First question I got, I heard him talking about this last night. I don't know if you watched it. On the second one for TJ Hall, it was zone or whatever you call it, quarters, whatever you want to call it. But they put two guys in Quinn's zone. How do you think Iowa should handle that, right? Because they had a guy right next to Quinn, right? Like running deep in the middle, they had a guy right next to Quinn. And then the guy who caught the ball was on the very far, sideline, right next to the sideline, right? But they had a guy right next to Quinn. So how do you think they play that? Like, do you think they just need to get rid of that? Or how do you think they play that if you're bringing a guy right next to Quinn and then having another guy on the other side?
It turns out, James, yesterday I said, I'm not sure because I only saw it one time, but I'm pretty sure that we were in cover two, as we call it, half coverage. TJ was a rolled corner. He's responsible for the flat. And then Schulte is the safety, is over the top, responsible for, in theory, half the field, right? The formation was actually a pretty tight formation, which encourages a lot of teams to play half coverage. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to measure from the width of the formation to the other perimeter of the formation, it wasn't very wide. In other words, we had a double slot, and they were both in fairly tight alignment, which encouraged us to play half coverage. The only problem with doing that, and I give the quarterback credit, he might have looked into it, but he thought about that inside receiver who was breaking toward the middle of the field. And Schulte, I think, read his eyes. And for a split second, Schulte was pretty sure it was going to be thrown inside. And then the quarterback, his eyes went back outside. He made the throw outside. And I was correct when I said, I'm pretty sure that was not on TJ because he was a rolled corner on that play. It turns out I was correct. And so one solution is you better think twice about staying in that coverage, because if you sense that they might be trying to attack downfield with more than just a couple of guys, that encourages you to think about quarters coverage, to play off coverage, as we call it. And now you've got the safety and the corner playing deep, and they can certainly have a chance to play both guys from that side of the formation.
Yeah, for sure. I saw that too, because I kind of thought right away, because I saw TJ's eyes, right? Like he looked like it was his zone in a way, because his eyes didn't really look deep. You know what I mean? Like, if he looked like he was trying to cover his zone. So
it's not his zone. He's a flat defender.
Oh yeah, it would cover the flat. I mean, cover the area he was supposed to cover, because he didn't really go much farther. I think he thought he had help over. It looked like he thought he had help over top, if that makes sense. Because he kind of stopped.
And just so you know, the other half player on the other side of the field, I've already said the quarterback's eyes were maybe a little bit on the inside receiver, breaking across Schulte's face. And then, of course, as the play developed, he looked a little bit more to the outside and made the throw to the outside. My point is that other half player should be in position to work that way, because that's where the quarterback's looking.
Yep, for sure. I was just curious because I kind of saw that too, and
I'll admit it is not easy to be a half player, because you've got to do a great job of reading the quarterback's eyes. And for that matter, if the quarterback's looking away from you, you have to be prepared to take that inside receiver who's breaking to the post, deep to the post.
Definitely, for sure. What do you guys think changed in the second half, right? Because the first half we really didn't get much going. The second half, what do you think changed a little bit to get us to score more? Because I think the run game was kind of the same the whole game. We had more big runs in the second half, but I feel like we were getting the run game going. It just wasn't going as well.
Well, here's another thing that changed in the second half. All of a sudden, we're getting more pressure. Think about that. So it almost sounds unfair. Think about this. We don't hesitate, Corey, to talk about putting in extra defensive ends in 3rd and long, right? We play with 4 defensive ends. We take out our 2 tackles, put in 4 defensive ends. You think about it, that same philosophy on offense might be, okay, do we want to consider, because our poor old left and right tackle are getting tired, let's put in the backup left and right tackle because they're fresh and they can pass protect better. Those poor guys that have taken every snap are trying to block edge rushers that are much more fresh than they are. It's one reason we get great results. And I do think one of the nicest developments of the game is the realization that we've got some guys in our defensive line that people don't know much about, and those guys are a threat to get to the quarterback when they're in there. They proved that on Saturday.
Especially
Don,
Herkett. I think Herkett's one guy we haven't talked about enough. He's been very impressive to me in the last 3 games.
Which one?
Herkett.
Well, right now I'm thinking Herkett, I'm thinking Llewellyn, I'm thinking Brian Allen. All those guys had good moments.
I was going to say Max Llewellyn, I think he's got the spin move down. He may need to develop a couple other moves, Don, because that's not going to work against everybody, but he's got a pretty good spin move off the edge. Does he remind you of anybody? You don't see that perfected. He pulled it off twice.
Well, I think of our undersized guy last year. Joe was undersized, but he's still pretty athletic. He's just undersized. But it looks like Llewellyn has the potential to be a really good edge rusher. How old is he now? He's still young, isn't he?
Is he what, 3rd year, James?
I think he's a junior. I know I'm 90% sure he's not a senior. I'm pretty sure he's not a senior, but
I've kind of associated him and Herkett together. I don't know if maybe Herkett's a year
old.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to get to the super chat here. I had this displayed earlier. Askabum wants to know about Aaron Graves' chances of making the NFL. Don, that's a hard question, but
it's not worth discussing right now, I'd say.
Llewellyn's a junior.
Llewellyn's a junior.
Okay.
Aaron had that really good performance week 1. Were you underwhelmed by what you saw yesterday? Is he getting just more attention with double teams? What would you say? I mean, obviously, Y.A. Black's playing alongside him, and both those guys are threats.
Yeah. I don't know how many I haven't seen the final tackle stats from yesterday. I certainly don't think Aaron played a bad game. I don't know that he'll ever play a bad game for us. But I just didn't see him. Come to think of it, against Iowa State, he only had one half of a tackle. He had an assist. That was it. So I think so much it ties into who's lined up across from him, how good a player he is, those kind of things. So I'm glad we have those 2 guys inside because they are a presence. I think people are going to have a hard time pushing them off the ball with any kind of consistency. I think they'll do a good job of protecting the linebackers, tying up 2 blockers all the time, not to mention not allowing any kind of running lanes for inside plays. But
he had one assisted tackle yesterday, Don, and I believe he drew a pretty big holding penalty in the first half. It was either him or Y. I think it was Aaron Graves, where the guy had him around the neck. He got outside on him. So, but I mean, he's got the body. We've talked about that since he's been in high school. Really good head on his shoulders. He's got an NFL body, but.
Well, he certainly had a game versus Illinois State, but let's face it, that's not a Big Ten opponent either. So we'll know a lot more in another month.
Yep.
I don't doubt that he will earn honors as the year plays out. The only question is he going to be first team, second team, or third team? Talking about third team all conference.
Right.
A chance to be first team all conference. At that point, you'll know that he does have a chance to make an NFL roster because to be first team all conference is a pretty big hill to climb for anyone.
I think we'll find out a lot more on Saturday too, because I think Darius Taylor is one of the best running. Probably maybe second, third, depending on what people say. Running backs are what we're going to face this year behind Ohio State, obviously. But Darius Taylor was really good last year, and I know he's been good this year, but he was also hurt to start the year off with. He didn't play the first game. He's been coming back from an injury, so I don't know maybe if he's trying to get his legs under. But we all know he's a really good running back, so I think that's a good test for this D-line, kind of to see where they're at. Going into Big Ten play on Saturday, to kind of see where they're at going into the rest of the games, obviously. But
And that Minnesota defense, pass defense right now, I mean, so I was looking through some of the metrics during our last call. Like, again, I don't know how much you read into these numbers right now, Don. In team passing efficiency defense, Minnesota is second in all of the FBS.
Yeah, and
So-
I think you'd have to. I saw the North Carolina game. I can't remember much about it. I was just watching it as a fan. But it's safe to say Carolina's always going to have decent players, and they're going to be well coached.
The
Good
quarterback
skill-
also got hurt. The
Yeah.
quarterback also got hurt that game too, so I don't know how much that affected UNC with Max Johnson getting hurt.
Max Johnson got hurt in
yeah.
that game, and that did make a difference.
Yeah.
So
But no, yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and I feel like their wide receivers they have a little bit more. They have depth, and obviously, maybe people don't think they're as good, but obviously, Daniel Jackson, Eli Spencer, Lameek Brockington, you know, they always seem to have at least one guy you kind of got to account for. in the
I'll say it
pass
this
there, for
way.
sure.
I'll say it this way, talking about the Minnesota game. Up until now, Corey, as you know, we have not put together two good halves.
Definitely.
We've been really good in one half and not as good in the other half. This is one game. I'll say it this way. I'd feel so much better about the game if I knew we were going to play 60 minutes of football that we can feel good about. I think that'll be enough to get us a win. Anything less than that, probably not.
For sure, and I'll talk to y'all later. I appreciate y'all having us on, and hopefully we can pull it off next week. You know, we need to start Big Ten and playoff, especially with Ohio State after that. You need to start Big Ten playoff the right way because you know you got the next one coming up after the bye week. So I'm just glad we got that win. I know we looked ugly early, but oh yeah, one more thing. I did just on my head. The lane. Why did Zach Lutmer when he was on the outside on the punt? If you watch it again, it looked like he was on the outside and he came in the middle. Why didn't he just stay a little bit more outside? Like the gun, I don't know where he was lined up a gunner outside. I don't know where he was. But if you watch it, he's running, instead of running straight down, he comes inside. And then you have three guys inside instead of him staying outside and maybe pushing him back inside, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're talking about the cover guys on the right side of the formation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he was running straight down. Instead of running straight, though, he cut it in. And then when he cut it in, the guy ran right where he was. And then
Yeah,
he
I'm not
broke
sure
it
what
up.
our plan is. Obviously, whether it's the widest guy in the formation or the next guy inside, somebody has to understand that they absolutely have to have outside leverage on the ball. Sometimes you'll see it'll be part of the plan that the widest protector is actually has the freedom to release inside and try to disrupt the return and even force a fair catch. But if that's the case, the next man in has to understand I'm the contained guy. Somebody's got to turn the play back inside. As you know, they outflanked our coverage unit. And then to make matters worse, Xavier had a poor angle on the ball and underestimated the guy's speed. He is fast. When I talk about a game, he had those two long touchdown passes and a punt return. And of course, he measures 6 feet maybe. He's not taller than 6 feet,
right.
I don't believe. But he can run and he can
I
catch.
saw somebody after the game tweeted out, "Hey, here's a guy who's probably going to be in the transfer portal here in a few months because he's probably going to have some suitors." Just the fact that he did that against Iowa, boy, that's a
Right.
highlight film gem, right? To be able to do that 3 times against Iowa.
No, for sure,
Yeah.
yeah. But that was the last thing I had. If you guys have a chance, maybe go back and watch that and see what kind of happened there. Because I did see him like run straight and then cut inside instead of running straight. And he looked like he would have been outside perfectly enough to put him back in.
Yeah, there's really no way to know unless
Yeah.
somebody tells us what their scheme is. Sometimes the widest guy in the formation is not the contained cover guy. Sometimes the game plan might involve let's release him inside and try to force a fair catch, and the next man in. Obviously, if that guy's going inside toward the ball, has a free run to the ball, you've got to be the contained man. And I believe it was number 6, as I recall, whoever 6
Lutmer,
is.
yeah. Lutmer.
Yeah. And the ball got outside, and the race is on.
Yep. All right. Enjoy you guys tonight. Appreciate you.
Thanks,
And go Hawks.
Appreciate it, sir. A couple things here. So, one, can I ask you about Xavier Wampa? Like, what do you make of that? So he's not getting all the same. Cohen and Tringer spelling him a lot. And I'm starting to get to the point where I know I was critical of Caleb Brown earlier and people have gone at me. I almost starting to wonder if maybe Xavier Wampa was a little overrated coming out of high school. I know that's a heathenistic thing for me to say because he's an Iowa kid and he was a high 4, low 5-star.
Right.
I don't know. I watch him run and I'm like, he's not that fast. Tell me I'm wrong, Don. Convince me I'm wrong and tell me that this is just a blip on the radar for Xavier Wampa and he's going to end up being an all Big Ten safety before he leaves Iowa. He's an upperclassman now. I just expect more of him, I guess.
I was going to say, is this year 3 for him in terms of eligibility?
Yes, I believe so.
Well, you're right about one thing. I do recall in game 1 he had a couple of missed tackles. And for that matter, Schulte I had him for 3 missed tackles on Saturday. And I've always liked the way Schulte played. But the bottom line, of course, you got to finish. If a guy runs through your tackle, then it's still a missed tackle. Even if you made contact, you got to be able to wrap up and get the guy on the ground. So, and Xavier has not been as reliable as you'd like. I'd say right now he looks a little better than he actually plays. You know, we're talking about going by results. I don't care how many stars you had, you got to get good results. I promise you, Phil Parker's, he didn't care how many stars you had either. Phil Parker just wants the best guys to play the most. That's why you see a lot of in-trader now. And there's obviously he's trying to be sure that Xavier understands, listen, we need you to perform better than what you have. And I'm sure Phil feels like he has that kind of capacity to do that, but you still got to get it done. And Phil's going to be able to assist you better than any other coach you can think of, but you've got to be ready to be coached too. That's part of the deal too. And I'm not saying Xavier's not ready to be coached. I don't know that. But the bottom line, it's all about results. It's not about how many stars you had. You know, you got to be productive. You got to make plays. And addressing the kicking game, you know, Xavier had a chance to save the day with a better angle, but he got caught up inside too. And I don't know that I should blame him as much as whoever the contain guy was. That's the guy we should blame because the ball got outside of our coverage unit. And I'm not sure who it was. It was either the outside man or the next one in.
Brian Bourne, thank you for the super chat. He says, the O-line is doing so great at run blocking, but it seems like their pass blocking hasn't given Kade much time. Also, Kade doesn't seem to hit his guys in stride. Minimal yak due to low throws, in my opinion. I don't think I disagree with that. It does seem like Cade's been under duress, especially on play action, more than you would like, Don. What do you attribute that to? And would you agree with that sentiment?
Well, there have been times when Kade had plenty of time to throw. There are times that's just football. You know, you can't keep your quarterback completely clean. That's your goal, of course, is for him to never get hit, but that's not realistic. If you're going to throw the ball 25 or 30 times, he's probably going to take a few shots. But having said that, and talking about throws, I always used to remind our guys of this. Quarterbacks understand this. I'd rather the ball be a little bit too low than too high. Because you know what happens on high throws, Corey? Tip balls are intercepted. That's assuming they get tipped. If they're just overthrows, they get intercepted too. So there were a few of those routes over the middle that were thrown a little bit low. We still caught the ball. Again, I'm like you, Corey. I'd rather them catch it with a chance to run out after the catch. But sometimes in case defense, maybe he's under a little bit of pressure. He's not really set to throw very well because of pressure. But to his credit, he still got the ball out there, and it was catchable at least. Maybe we had to leave our feet to catch it, whatever the case might be. But at least I didn't see high throws. You saw a lot of high throws a year ago or 2 years ago, and those are problematic, you know, because tip passes in general end up in the wrong hands.
Thank you, Brian, for the super chat. Is appreciated. And Lemansky with the super chat as well. Lemansky says the Troy long passes take time. I would have liked some D-line pressure. Need more D-line pressure going forward. That's a question mark. They got to the quarterback at times. However, when they didn't, Ross made him pay. I don't know what else to say. I mean, the question was asked earlier about TJ Hall. The big play that he gave up, was it in the first or the second quarter? I think you were talking to Alex about that. That was just a little bit of would you consider that to be a double cut? I mean, yeah. It's kind of a hesitation play and a go. To me, here's my question, Don. Here's a layman's take or an amateur's take at what happened on that play. And you tell me I'm wrong. we heard, especially going into the season throughout fall camp, that a big emphasis for Iowa's defense and even Phil Parker was, hey, we got to do better with takeaways. And we've seen Jamari Harris benefit. We saw him jump a route. I think it was week 1 against Illinois State. We saw him get a pick 6 this week. It was not on a jumped route, but it was a good play, bad pass by the Troy quarterback. But I just wonder if, I'm not blaming coaching on TJ's mistake there, but if there's maybe a little bit of an overemphasis on, hey, let's find ways to create turnovers, and then that gets a DB's eyes in the wrong place, or his mind maybe in the wrong place. I'm not trying to criticize Phil Parker, but you get where I'm going with this, right, Don?
Yeah, absolutely. Incidentally, Jamari had a chance to pick another ball too. I didn't realize, but he actually had a chance at that play. The ball was thrown. He would say it was a drop probably, because I think he had a better chance to catch it than the receiver did. You remember the play I'm talking about? I think it was in second half sometime. But he just did a good job of anticipating the throw. It was to an inside receiver, and he was breaking through the guy's outside shoulder and was actually better positioned to intercept than he was to catch it. It fell incomplete. Not that it was an easy ball to catch, because they were right there shoulder to shoulder when the ball arrived. But anyway, let's just go back and talk about the first touchdown pass. That was absolutely TJ's fault. The analysts called it a nod route. We used to call it a sluggo. A sluggo is simply slant and go. Now it wasn't a really. He didn't really show a true hard slant, but he did take a step inside, put his eyes inside, and just for a second, TJ bit, and that gave a guy with that much speed a chance to clear him outside, and then the race is on. That's clearly TJ's play. That's his fault. So the only response I can give you, I think back to some really good corners we've had in the years past. A guy a long time ago that would hardly ever get beaten deep was Merton Hawkeyes. And here's the bottom line. You don't want to give up underneath cuts, underneath throws, but you gladly give up more than a few of those to protect against a home run. And so I'm sure that the thing that Coach Parker will say is, don't bite on those double cuts. You know they're coming, because you don't have as much experience as Jamari does. They're going to try to get to you. And all I can ask you to do is never get beat deep, and as best you can, contest all those underneath throws. And beyond that, be reliable to get them on the ground or get them out of bounds. And I think in general, TJ's done that. I think you heard it a while back in time, a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, TJ gets the nod because of consistency. You heard that word. So he had proven in camp that he was going to play smart and not get beaten to those kind of double cuts that invariably are going to be coming, especially when you show aggressiveness. I mentioned after that interception in game 1 by Jamari, I said, you better get ready. They're going to double cut you, I promise, because you're an aggressive corner. And I'm surprised, to be honest with you, that they haven't tried to work Jamari over in the last 2 games. But the bottom line is that TJ knows he's going to get tested again and again. One reason I was confident that second touchdown was not really on TJ. You might recall, Corey, the next time they were on the field, TJ was still out there. I'm pretty sure if that would have been his mistake, he would have been pulled at that point, because that would mean he'd been beaten twice.
We did see some snaps from Deshaun Lee and John Nestor. And, hey, may the best – we kept saying that during fall camp. May the best guy win. The people that said, TJ Hall – I heard people on social media, that PJ Hall should have never been on the field in the first place. Right. You're not there every day. That's healthy competition going on in that. If there's a position on this team year in and year out where there's healthy competition, it's DB, specifically at corner, I think. Guys go down. You guys got to be ready. You got to build depth there. And even Phil talked about that. I remember with his Big Ten Network appearance during their the network's fall camp tour, he talked about the need to develop depth at DB. So, you know, it's unfortunate. I think what Kirk brought up yesterday during the press conference rings true, Don. It's unfortunate that they got exposed during September and had to give up a loss. Like, if you could have just we always talk about survive in advance. And if you could just survive that Iowa State game, heck, you're leading 14-0, man, and you should have been up 17-0 or 21-0, and you blow that game. If you can just survive that one and then learn, that's the best way to do it, right?
Exactly. You don't There's nothing wrong with learning experience. That's how you learn to avoid mistakes. It's because you do get burned. You just hope it doesn't cost you a game. And sadly, there were any number of plays a week ago that would have made a difference in the game. We know that. But here's the good news. I do flash back on the numbers from a year ago. I'll remind our listeners, in 10 conference games, we gave up 13 explosive plays, far and away the best in the Big Ten. Here's the rest of that story. I believe over the entire season, as I recall, we gave up 20. In other words, we gave up 7 in 3 non-conference games last year, and yet we only gave up 13 more in the next 10 games. So even a year ago, we were beaten sometimes and had some explosive plays in the preseason, if you will, in the non-conference part of our schedule. Hopefully we can get the same result as a year ago, learn from our mistakes, cut down on those explosive plays.
That was last year, Don?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great point because it's not like Iowa play, as Mark Rogers always brings up, Iowa plays one of the most boring non-conference schedules year in and year out. And last year was as boring as this year. I guess you could say they played 2 FBS opponents instead of an FCS and an FBS, but their non-conference was Iowa State, Western Michigan, and Utah State. So
right. Let's face it, we have one difficult non-conference game every year. That would be the Cyclones.
And it does seem, I think you're right. I'd be interested to go back and look at all non-conference play over the last 10 years and see how it does seem like Iowa has this thing where they tend to give up some big plays to non-Power 5 schools, Don.
Correct.
So I'm not crazy on that. I'm reflecting back on Western Michigan. I think there were at least a couple. We had this same conversation after week 3 last year, Don. And listen, Iowa won 41-10 in that game, but it was close at halftime. It was a close game at halftime. I remember doing a live show at halftime because people were panicking, and Iowa pulled away like they did Saturday. I remember the Kent State game several years ago. That was a game where Iowa gave up some big plays. So yeah, maybe that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that before you brought up last season. Seven explosive plays in 3 non-conference games, 2 of which were against G5 opponents last year, and then 13 the rest of the way. And does that include postseason, including the Big Ten championship game and bowl game?
That includes the Michigan game. It does not include the bowl game.
Okay, but that's still 10. That's still 10 conference games.
Yeah, we averaged 1.3 in those 10 conference games. I know that for a fact. And I don't know for sure that all 7 of those explosives were in the first 3 games. Maybe that included the bowl game. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and check.
And maybe there's an argument that could be made that, hey, the Big Ten West just didn't have a lot of great deep threat talent.
Well, let's not forget, we played some crossover games against good teams.
You're right, and that includes Penn State. Penn State was, I don't know how many explosive plays. They didn't give up many explosive plays.
They had none.
None, yeah.
We actually had an edge on explosive plays. We had 1. They had none.
I remember that conversation.
And I was with either 20 or 21 yards. I can't remember. It barely cleared the bar.
Lemansky, thank you for the super chat. Love the 3-way wide receiver debate, fellas. So thank you for the super chat. And folks, we're recapping Iowa's 38-21 loss to Troy. I've got a few more things to get to. We've also got a caller from Corey on hold. And we're going to talk about Iowa, Minnesota, because I know people starting to think about getting Floyd back, and rightfully so. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more from the one and only Coach Don Patterson. You're watching from the Hawkeye of the Storm. This is Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. We'll be right back. Casium believes every young athlete deserves a shot at greatness. By making data analytics accessible and easy, they provide a new way for coaches and athletes to improve their game. Casium's digital scoring app, all-in-one stats, and chart software enable teams to quickly and easily find new ways to strategize and harness the power of data. Join Casium in revolutionizing the world of youth sports with tools that make a difference. Schedule a software demo or sign up today at Casium.com. Casium, where sports technology sparks victory. Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson is proudly presented by Brad Van Meter and his team down at State Farm in Des Moines, and offering great rates on a variety of different types of insurance, including auto, renters, life insurance, homeowners insurance, Iowans. It's always a smart type of coverage to have if you don't, or maybe you're not satisfied with your current rates, your current coverage. Certainly see what Brad and his team can do for you. It's worth a call. It's totally free. Give him a call, 515-256-6480. You can also visit his website and request a quote that way, www.bradvanmeter.com, or visit him in person, 4229 Fleur Drive down in Des Moines. That's Brad Van Meter at State Farm in Des Moines. And Iowa Smokehouse. Yes, Iowa Smokehouse is back for another year of Iowa Postgame here with Coach Don Patterson. Tasting is believing with their jerky, their meat sticks, their ketchups, their barbecue sauces, their salsas. It's all tasty, and you can get it for 15% off your order. Get it straight to your doorstep. And as the months get colder, we less and less want to go outside. So let them do the work for you. Use the code Hawkeyes at checkout for 15% off your total order, courtesy of Iowa Smokehouse, and get some great snacking products this sports season. Also want to take a moment to thank RTI Threads. We mentioned our RTI Threads player of the game just a moment ago. We also brought up a couple of the people on this list. Jacob Gill, who has turned into Iowa's most reliable receiver to this point. And Aaron Graves, certainly. His name was brought up about his NFL prospects. Carson Shire, Zach Lutmer, a couple of young guys who are really contributing on special teams. Carson's gotten in for some linebacker duties, and certainly he's next in line when this All-American group of linebackers graduate. Shop RTI Threads at rtithreads.com and check out the apparel lines, including an apparel line from Cooper DeJean, who's now with the Philadelphia Eagles. RTI Threads, I know, has been working with Cooper with his new Eagles apparel. So check it all out at rtithreads.com. Our RTI Threads player of the game yesterday, Kaleb Johnson, 25 carries, $173, 2 touchdowns. Don, number one in the country right now in total yards. Again, 2 of these games have been against inferior opponents. Do you anticipate Kaleb Johnson continuing this 100-yard streak, or does Minnesota break this weekend?
Well, I do recall one of the callers yesterday from Minnesota. I asked him specifically, would you give a higher grade to your run defense or your pass defense? He didn't really hesitate, run defense. So it's going to be a good test. I think their run defense must be pretty good. I don't know what their numbers are.
Like I said, their passing their numbers would indicate their pass defense is a little better. They're number 2 in the country in pass defense efficiency. They're number 20 in total rush defense. But it's early, and now they have produced good DBs. I mean, we can acknowledge that. Trying to think of the kid that's down in Tampa Bay who's carved himself a nice NFL career. They've had good DBs that have been drafted high, but they've been good overall under PJ Fleck on the defensive side.
You're right. Their recipe for success is very similar to ours.
And if I recall, they kind of had a down year last year in that category. So they're going to be ready to go. And this is a get them back game. I guess I know everybody's calling the game against Troy a get right game for Kade McNamara. Do you feel like Kade got right? I mean, I don't know if that's actually a term that's used in the coaching circles, Don, but was his performance suffice to you? I mean, I know he didn't look great at times, but his numbers were really solid.
Yeah, I felt much better about his game. I'll tell you one reason why. He threw the ball 23 times, and correct me if I'm wrong, Corey, a defender never touched any of those 23 passes. There were 4 incompletions. One of them was a throwaway. A couple of them were balls that were thrown safely outside of the receiver. And the other one was a drop. It was thrown a little bit behind number 15, but he still should have caught it. Remember the one over the middle? Those are the 4 incompletions. And as I mentioned last night on the show, any number of those throws were intermediate passes that were thrown 15 yards or so downfield. It's not like they were all high percentage throws. Some were thrown. I know the negative is nothing was over the top. I understand that. But sometimes Wiggins plays a good example. He did a good job of bending back to the ball. Remember him squeezing toward the ball, which gave him a chance to outflank the deep defender there. And you turned a 15-yard gain maybe into a 33-yard gain. So that was significant. Good to see. Let me mention one thing, Corey. A guy did on the chat, or whatever you call it. He says, any report on the Cade hand wiping before a pass play tip-off? You might remember, or maybe you weren't aware, Corey, but last night a guy called in who remained nameless, and he said, I'm pretty sure of this. Every time Cade goes to the towel, it's a pass. Now, that concerned me, if that was true. So what do you think I did? I went back and watched the game a second time, so it's not interfering with my grading. Here's what I can report. When Cade goes from the towel to the snap, every time, I'll say it this way, every time he touched the towel, every time we threw a pass, we touched the towel before we threw the pass. But here's the good news. That also applies to all of our runs. So I never found one snap in which Cade did not wipe his hands on a towel.
And that's the way it should be.
Correct.
About that, Don.
He's going to the towel every time. Oftentimes in the gun, he'll actually wipe his hands twice. Now, I think yesterday was the more humid day than normal, but for whatever the case might be, the good news, there's no tip with Cade in the towel. He goes to the towel every snap I saw, and there were a few snaps where we were going tempo and the camera didn't catch Cade. I couldn't chart them all, but I tell you what I did do. I charted 48 snaps, and I doubt that Cade certainly he didn't have more than 60 snaps. I didn't count, of course, all those snaps belonging to Sullivan because that wasn't the point. But the good news, Cade goes to the towel, it might mean run, it might mean pass. All it means for sure when he goes to the towel, it means we're about to run another play. That's all it means.
Don, how about the laces thing? So that was brought up during the broadcast. I think you guys talked about it briefly yesterday. What are your thoughts on the comment that Cade doesn't throw with laces? Have you ever heard of this with a quarterback?
Yeah, there were some throws. This is the way we used to teach it. Some throws that need to be out of your hands immediately. It's catch throw. And you make sure the quarterback understands, be damned with the laces. You got to catch it. You got to get it out now. We don't have time for you to spin the ball.
So you're saying that he's not always throwing without laces? That was
I'm not sure.
The implication during the broadcast was that, we didn't realize it, but he doesn't throw with laces.
I don't think he always throws without the laces. I don't believe he, just for the sake of argument, let me put it this way, Corey. Anytime you're in direct under center, the ball's going to come up exactly as you want it to. How's it going to come up? So that your fingers are across the laces. If you're right-handed, your right fingers.
Yeah, but I'm saying, if is that just coincidental? Is it happening by happenstance as opposed?
I don't think he's throwing off the laces because he prefers it that way. A lot of guys do. In the gun, of course, you don't know exactly where the laces are going to be. But in general, most quarterbacks, they catch it, and without even thinking about it, they spin it. They spin it so that the laces are across those fingers on your throwing hand. That's what most quarterbacks do.
Jack wants to know, Don, how is Cade's target selection? Is he checking down too much? Thank you for the super chat, Jack.
Well, I was encouraged that we took some receivers that were down the field yesterday, any number of them. And there were some guys over the top, maybe. We didn't even attempt very many deep throws. There were, I think, there's a time or two maybe where a guy was trying to get on top of the defense, but not many. So the good news, I don't think he's settled. Let me back up on one that probably bothered you. Remember I think it was 3rd and 9. Yeah, this is in the first half. We were 3rd and 9 on the plus 26. We're going in. This is the play before the field goal. 3rd and 9 on the plus 26. We were empty. I'm pretty sure that's a check. We threw what I call a quick convoy. It was a catch-throw thing. Remember he throwing the ball to the inside receiver?
Yeah.
We didn't block it very well. The lineman had to get out in front. Wasn't timed up very well. We gained a couple of yards. Now everybody's wondering, why in God's name would we call a short pass on 3rd and 9? In Tim's defense, I'm 99% sure that was a check. Here's why it was a check. They did a good job of making us into thinking it was going to be a pressure look. They showed pressure. Cade checked to a quick throw to be sure he's not getting sacked on 3rd and 9, being knocked out of field goal range. We threw the ball. They had backed out. They tackled us for a gain of 2. So the fans weren't happy. They were probably thinking, that's on Tim. in Tim's defense, that's not the play Tim called. I'm 99% sure we checked to that. And I'm not even going to beat up on Kade because that was a good job of baiting us into making a short throw.
Although Spencer Tillman did bring up on that throw that he didn't think it was on target because he thought it could have been placed in a better place. Who was it that caught that? Was that Gill or?
I think it was Gil. You're right about one thing. Here's what on those kind of throws, we're talking about a guy breaking in, actually moving toward the quarterback. The point is, take a little bit off the pace of the ball to make it more catchable, and be sure you hit him on the downfield side, right? So you can catch it and run out with it. You don't want to pull him back away from the line of scrimmage. You want to hit him on the downfield side so that he can catch it and move right into his position up that alley. So maybe the throw was off a little bit. I don't recall exactly where the throw was, but that's your goal, is to hit him right there on his downfield shoulder.
Thank you for that super chat, Jack. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
Coach and Corey, this is John.
Hey, John.
Even I had heard that the field goal holder was going to be Reese Dakin, and then it ended up being Tyler Nissen.
Yep. For the record, I had been reporting that for the last month that it was going to be Ty Nissen.
How much say does Drew Stevens have in who the field goal holder is?
As far as I'm aware, fine. Why do you ask?
Oh, I was just curious if it come down to the field goal holder or the kicker wanted somebody and the coaching staff wanted somebody else. I would think the field goal kicker's confidence in the holder would have to be pretty big. Who'd win that argument? Probably the coaching staff.
Yeah, that's a good question. Don, you want to take it?
Yeah, I have one point to make. Here's where it might be an issue when you go on the road. There's a travel restriction. I believe it's still 70. Maybe it's a little higher now than it used to be. But the bottom line is you don't get to take your entire team to Minnesota. So that holder right now, that's why so many teams have a punter that's also a holder, right? You don't have to have a space on the plane for a holder because that is your punter. So I don't know what we're going to do. This guy that holds right now that held yesterday, Corey, is he a backup punter? What is he? I don't even know who he is.
Yeah, he's a backup punter.
Backup punter. Well, we don't want to carry two punters. We know that. Now, maybe it's not an issue. It depends on injuries, all those kind of things. But in general, that's why you want your punter, if you can do it, to be the holder.
Why do you mean you don't want to carry two punters? You're saying with the new roster requirements, you're saying that you don't want to have two punters in the roster?
I doubt that this backup punter, well, maybe he'll travel simply because he's also the holder.
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
It's not an issue. Maybe the travel roster, maybe it's more than 70 now. More
You're talking
thinking about it.
travel roster. Okay.
Yeah, travel roster. You're only allowed to travel a
Yep.
finite number of players per conference.
Well, I would guess that he's traveling. Good point. That is a good point. We haven't seen this team on the road yet. But that would be a weird situation if you're playing a different holder on the road. That would just be stupid.
I can't imagine that guy's not going to travel. Now, where it might get
travel a backup punter. I mean, what if Reese Dakin gets hurt? I mean, who else is punting? They got to have somebody.
I think there's at least somebody on the team that was a punter in high school that could be serviceable if our punter was injured.
I would guess, Don, that maybe I'm wrong on this, but I would guess over the course of LeVar Wood's tenure at Iowa that more often than not they travel two punters.
I bet you're wrong. I say that because I don't know that. I honestly don't. But
I do. Here's one. Ryan Gersonde was their holder. He was a backup punter.
Okay.
I know Colton Rastetter held. He was their starter. I'm trying to think of who else has held. Torrey Taylor, was Torrey holding?
Yeah.
Was he?
Yes.
Tell me if I'm wrong. He's holding for the Bears right now.
That I don't know. Okay.
He is.
All right.
He's a good holder.
He's a better punter.
I agree. But I think Drew Stevens would tell you he was a very good holder also.
I would be curious to know how often they've traveled two punters. Because like I say, I know Ryan Gersonde was the holder for some time and he never started. So they've done this before.
Yeah, I think I'd be surprised if that same guy's not traveling. But oftentimes, I think you'll agree, Corey, sometimes the holder is the backup kicker, maybe even.
I haven't seen that at Iowa, and I don't know that I've ever
I'm just
seen
talking about football in general.
Yeah. Well, the holder, I mean, I remember Tony Romo. Remember the Tony Romo?
Well, is it hard to imagine? I'd be willing to bet you that Schulte could be a good holder.
Why can't a backup quarterback be the holder? You know, that used to be the thing, Don. I mean, again,
nowadays,
remember the Tony Romo? What play was that? What year would that have been?
I think the main reason people don't want to put a quarterback back there is the possibility of injury.
Wait. I shouldn't say who cares. That sounds cruel. Why not have Marco back there or James Rezar, or you don't have to have one of the top two quarterbacks. Have a backup court.
There's another really good reason to have a quarterback as a holder. It's called a fake field goal.
Exactly. And I guess my other question is, how many quarterbacks typically travel?
3.
Okay, so play the third one, whether maybe that's Jackson Stratton. That will be interesting to see this Saturday who travels at quarterback, because we had heard that Jackson Stratton looked pretty good, but I'm guessing it'll be Marco Linez. But it'll be interesting to see who that third quarterback is this Saturday.
You're right.
Anything else, John?
Yeah, just real quick. Everybody wants to see Brandon Sullivan, and I understand why, but I listened to an interview with a sports reporter that covered Northwestern, and he said Brandon Sullivan's record as a Big Ten in the Big Ten games as a quarterback was 2-10. So I just wonder, maybe the coaching staff thinks he doesn't bring that much more to the plate than what Caden does, other than mobility, and maybe they prefer Cade's experience over Brandon's mobility.
Well, let me ask.
Just wondered what your thoughts were.
Let me ask you this. Let me take this one, Don, just for a second.
Okay.
Let me just remind you, John, that Deacon Hill's record as Iowa's starting quarterback was what, like 9-2 or something? What was it, Don?
That was just a good comeback.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, like, Northwestern just wasn't very good. His numbers were pretty good at a Big Ten school against Big Ten competition. And
all I do recall, his pass efficiency was 146 last year. That was higher than anybody that played for Iowa by a long shot.
And can we just bring this up? And John, I don't want to keep you on the line for this necessarily, but let's just bring up real quickly. I'm not making fun of anybody. When I bring up Deacon Hill as an example, it just is what it is. Like, go back. Don, you watched this weekend and you saw some of these Iowa quarterbacks right now that have transferred out of the program are struggling, and I mean struggling. Deuce Hogan, I watched him late. Did you watch the game, New Mexico State?
No.
I watched New Mexico State late last night on True TV, and he got yanked. And their team got absolutely throttled. It was like 42-0 at half. It was something ridiculous. His team got throttled. He got yanked. And we're talking about New Mexico State. Now, they don't have great skill position players around them, but Carson Mays at Abilene Christian isn't playing. Deuce Hogan is not playing well at New Mexico State and is not the overwhelming starter. Deacon Hill got yanked yesterday. He's at Utah Tech. They're getting destroyed every game. And again, I don't want to try to argue against myself, because I do think we put too much of an emphasis on quarterback play and give quarterbacks too much credit when you win and too much blame when you lose. But I guess my point is, John, Iowa's won a lot of games in spite of quarterback play. And my guess is that you could argue with some of those games that you're talking about with Sullivan that Northwestern actually managed to lose games in spite of quarterback play, because his numbers were a lot better than what we've seen out of any recent Iowa quarterbacks against the same level of competition.
Okay. Do you guys have any thoughts on Indiana going out to UCLA and beating them like 43-13?
Beating them to a pulp. No,
I would say very impressed.
No, that's the old James Madison coach. I don't know much about that Indiana team. I've not watched a snap of them this year, and I think UCLA is vulnerable. I'll say this. I'm very happy Iowa goes to UCLA as opposed to going to Bloomington, and I would not have said that prior to the season. I would have thought, hey, going to the West Coast playing a UCLA team would have been a more challenging thing. They both got first-year coaches, but boy, I have not watched the game, Don, but that's a beatdown.
Yes, it was.
And James Madison was real. There's a reason why they hired that guy. James Madison went from being an FCS opponent to an FBS opponent to a really good G5 opponent.
Yeah, and I believe Cignetti's record at JMU was something like 52-9 or something. They've had a good team for a long time. That man knows what he's doing. He's a good coach.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, John. Appreciate the call. Doug, thank you for the super chat. Big game next week. Really dislike PJ Fleck in Minnesota. Nothing personal. Go Hawks. Appreciate that comment, Doug. Thank you for the super chat, sir. It is greatly appreciated. Getting kind of late. Okay. We have got Corey on hold. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse line before we do that. Steve wants to know, Coach, a friend of yours and mine, Bob, is it Meanders, told me about your analytics under Hayden. How'd you learn to use them? I know you love math, but did someone teach you?
Not really. I'm kind of self-taught. My favorite class at West Point was a class in probability and statistics. And I've always been, I think everybody has one gift. And if I have a gift, I'm really good with numbers. And so I'm the kind of person, it sounds odd, but I might be watching TV and I'm thinking about what 56 times 87 is. That's kind of weird. But I've also been accused of being a card counter in blackjack, and I'm not. But I do know probability and know probability really well. So the bottom line, this all started for me when we were at UConn. Bob Diaco said, Coach, I don't even know if we're focused on the right stuff. Could you do some study on it, get back to me? And I said, sure. And it turned out he was right. So it really started off, I simply picked a lot of the most logical parameters, and I simply asked the question, looking at all of our games and then all of the games in the American Athletic Conference. Did you win the parameter? If you win the parameter, did you win the game? So what I'm looking for is a high correlation between winning a parameter and winning the game. Simple example, turnover margin. Turnover margin historically is a good stat to have on your side. But in the American Athletic Conference, it wasn't that important. And turned out he was right. So that was a long time ago. That was about, 10 years ago or 11 years ago. And since then, it's evolved into something a lot more complicated than that. But that's where it all started. I've always, in describing it, a lot of our listeners have seen the movie Moneyball. And the way I explain it, what I do is Moneyball for college football. That's really what it is. And it's all about numbers. It's not about looking at video. It's all about crunching numbers in maybe ways you wouldn't even imagine. And my ultimate goal is to find a prediction model that very, very accurately determines the winner of the game. And just to give you an idea, a year ago, I found one that was 58 wins and no losses. 5 parameters. You simply need to win more than the other team. You can beat them 3-2. You can beat them 5-0. 5-0 is a one-sided game, of course. You can beat them 3-2, and you won the game every time. That's over all 64 games. That's pretty amazing if you think about it. Now the bad news, off last fall, the new prediction model is not 100% win, but it's still close. It's 95% win. So the prediction model that involves different parameters than a year ago, last year, over 64 games, it predicted the winner 59 out of 64 games, only 5 ties. The record in those 59 games was 56 wins and 3 losses. And none of the losses involved Iowa. So for us, it was 100% reliable all over again. And the good news is our guys are going to know what those 5 parameters are, and I promise you the other team doesn't know. It remains we still have to win 3 out of 5. But the good news, any 3.
Right. Erica, thank you for the super chat. I may have missed it. What do you make of the game against Minnesota next week? I hope we beat the used car salesman, get Floyd back, go Hawks. We are going to talk about that here in about 10 minutes or so, Erica, so hang tight. Thank you for the super chat. Did want to make sure, acknowledge that, and we are going to come back to Minnesota in just a moment. D. Rollifson, I hear Corey predicting first Rose Bowl win since 1959. Unfortunately, I don't think that counts. Now, if you want to say the first win at the Rose Bowl, was it really 59? Is that the last Rose Bowl win, Don?
Well, in our defense, we've only been out there what, 4 times maybe?
Yeah. Well, nevertheless, so
It's hard to get there. That's my point.
get there, and it's
A
hard.
regular season's a lot different. I couldn't help but notice, sure enough, there were a lot of empty seats when Indiana came to town in November. The way UCLA is looking, there's going to be a lot of empty seats for our game too. We might outnumber them by game time.
Thank you, D. Rollifson, for the super chat. And as a reminder, folks, if you missed this plug earlier, have you been over to RTI Threads and checked out the official merchandise of Aaron Graves, Jacob Gill, Carson Shire, Zach Lutmer? Get ready for game day and show off to your friends with some awesome, cool logos and authentic merchandise from the official NIL partners of all these athletes. RTI Threads, visit rtithreads.com. We're going to give you a brief website tour here in just a minute. Again, rtithreads.com. We'll go back to our Iowa Smokehouse line. We've got Corey waiting on hold. Corey, how you doing, buddy boy? Oh, boy. Uh-oh.
Enjoying a nice, cold, swarm beer. Support the swarm. Okay, so I question Corey's decision-making lately. Choosing weddings over this show, really? Okay, but anyway.
Never mind. Go on.
My second point. Why are we redshirting Don? We need him this year. You're not redshirting this guy. Okay, so pull the red.
Listen, I'm redshirting Kyle, so I can use Kyle in up to 4 shows this year, and he can retain his eligibility. So he's only used 2 shows. Notice he's not on tonight, so he's got 2 more shows, and then I still can save his red shirt. That's how that works, Corey. By the way, real quick, before you go on with whatever you were going to say, let me just throw this up on the screen. Don, we mentioned this earlier, but see this? This is the world. You remember Waldo?
Oh yeah.
Your stripes are a little. We'll flash this back and forth. See, your stripes are a little thinner than Waldo's, and all you need is the cap and the cane, Don, and we're all set.
Well, we've already proven that caps don't look very good on top of my head, so probably not going to be a cap or a cane.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on. Couple things. Great to hear from Lemansky. We love you, Lemansky. I was getting worried.
I know.
Hadn't heard from you. Erica, I want to echo my hateful sentiment toward PJ Fleck. Now, I just may be misinterpreting the guy, but he just kind of seems like he projects this artificial, it's used car sales, but I'm sorry. That's the way he comes off. And I could just be misinterpreting. But Erica, we have something in common. It's our hatred for PJ Fleck's image that he projects. But anyway, I do conflict with Erica on, you guys wanted to see Sullivan. Well, Ferentz gave you what you wanted. He put him in the game. So now you guys, hush up, because Sullivan got his shot.
Well, let me just say this. Can I read you just a couple of notes off here, Corey? Here's what I have. Sully in red zone. Let me just say this. You know who else was in the red zone on that play, Don? Well, on one of the red zone. I didn't look at the other red zone tries. But there was some substitutions on the offensive line as well. I know Cade Piper was in at either left guard or left tackle. Didn't
I see him at right tackle also or not? Maybe I'm confused.
Well, DeYoung was in at right tackle.
Okay.
But Piper was in at one point, and Sullivan was in there, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. By the way, I thought it was funny. Spencer Tillman. Anybody else catch this? I like Spencer Tillman, but he sometimes says the oddest things, like they don't make any sense. Don, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Spencer Tillman was quoted as saying, and I quote, "McNamara's got a big arm. We know it." What are you talking about? He doesn't have a big arm. What are you talking about? I mean, you can get away with saying that about Petrus. You can get away with saying that about Hill. You can get away with saying that about Stanley. but Kade has the weakest of arm. I'm not saying he's got a bad arm. I'm just saying he has the weakest of arms of all those guys. And he may have the weakest arm on the roster. We don't know that, but he does not have a big arm. I mean, give him credit for what he does have, but I thought that was a dumb comment. But I will say this, you put in Sullivan in the fourth quarter, 3 minutes to go, which is earlier than they put him in when Iowa was up 40-0 against Illinois State. I give Iowa credit for putting him in, but Don, I get you're trying to run clock, but you're up 3 scores. Give him a pass play. Give him a pass play. Let him do something. Let him throw the ball, for Pete's sake. I know you're running clock, but can we give him a quarterback run? Give him a quarterback run. Show us something. And I'm glad they're using him in the red zone. But am I just, I know some people will say I'm never happy and I'm just looking for things to complain about, but give the guy a pass play with 3 minutes to go.
I think an opposing team that's on the losing end of the game, they're not offended by the backup getting in. Now they're going to be offended if you try to throw over the top, of course. But just to make a first down, that's football.
I don't perceive that decision to not give him a pass play had anything to do with trying to not disrespect the opponent. I think it had more to do with Kirk just doing anything he can to get out of there and be risk adverse. That's just Iowa. I don't think that had anything to do with disrespect, Don. Remember, they had no problem giving Max White a touchdown a year ago against Western Michigan in the final minute because it was a run play.
Right.
So I don't think it had anything. And that was a little controversial. I remember we talked about that after the game. So anyways.
Yeah, to put in your backup and go play action post or play action go route, unless you really hate the guys on the other side of the field, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't show up your opponent. But let's face it, is there anything wrong with allowing the backup to throw a forward pass? Heavens no.
And how about this? Let's give this. I don't know if this was brought up during the broadcast last night, Don, with Kyle, but let's give Brendan Sullivan credit for something else. They scored that touchdown there, and Troy had 12 guys in the field.
You're right. I was thinking they can't even defend us with 12. I will admit, from my seat, I really thought at the time that it was a poor decision to flip the ball forward. Because let's face it, he might have dropped it.
Yeah.
But looking at the TV tape, I believe one of those inside defenders would have run Sully down. And if he hadn't flipped it forward, it might not have been a touchdown. They had a guy in pursuit, but the fact that we flipped it a little bit wider on the field gave us an easy touchdown.
It's a pretty safe throw.
It is. I wasn't worried about it falling in, being intercepted. I'm just worried about him buffing the ball, because it was flipped underhand, and it's a little bit of an awkward angle. Thankfully, he made the play.
What do you think about running him red zone? I'm sure you talked about this yesterday, but just that.
Well, my initial thought, of course, I was disappointed that we didn't run him, and then I started thinking, no, truthfully, when you put him out there, what should they expect? They should expect you to run the quarterback.
Correct.
So it made sense to use him as a decoy.
I thought it was beautiful. I thought in the one big run for Kaleb Johnson, it was like, that's because here's what happened. Let's remember the first time he was down in the red zone, he comes in there, Troy calls a timeout, and Iowa comes back out there with Sullivan again, and they hand the ball to Kaleb Johnson. Now, it worked. It looks great, but to me, that's just the smart, the zag to their zig. And, like you said, perfect decoy play, and then he did run later and made a good play. I still think that utilizing his skill set, I'm fine with playing him down in the red zone, but I think there's ways to get him involved other than once they get inside the 5. That's my opinion.
Absolutely. Just a simple example. Let's imagine we're out in the field, it's 3rd and long. You think we're ever going to run Kade on a key draw?
True.
Maybe, but not as likely to run Sullivan on a key draw.
Yeah, we haven't seen Kade scamper since week 1. It seems maybe that's just a result of play calling and situational stuff. Go ahead, Corey. Didn't mean to take over.
And now you got me sidetracked, but Kade, week 1 seemed quick, very quick on his scampers. Now here, this past game, he seemed slow. I don't know if he dinged up his knee on one of those QB runs that he made, but something's going on, it seems like. But anyway, I look at Iowa, kicking game, sound. We're going to win that. Rushing game, offense and defense, we're solid. I think we're going to win that against most of our opponents. My concern is the passing game, both defending it and, on the offensive side. Let's just admit it. One of our greats graduated, went on to the NFL. Cooper DeJean, we are missing that guy. That's a big hole. We all want to say our defense is better than it was last year, but is it? That is a significant hole, because when you look at this, whether they're playing quarters, halves, whatever, when that corner gets left out on an island and he senses a double move, if you recall, Cooper DeJean could catch up to that receiver, and he had some deep balls thrown on him, but they wouldn't get to the house.
Here's my only issue with that argument, Corey. My issue with that argument is we saw Deshaun Lee play a lot last year because Jamar Harris was out with gambling. And so I guess what I'm saying is, like, they were still playing one of these young guys. Deshaun Lee was the guy last year, and he's available. Last I checked, Deshaun Lee's available. So they still have a really good lockdown corner. Like, Jamari seems to have taken that next step. But it's not like they had Jamari of this year last year alongside Cooper DeJean.
Right.
Yeah, what I would say, though, is they could give more support to the younger guy, because Cooper could play it basically one-on-one, if need be. Do we really have that lockdown corner that could be on the island by himself?
I haven't seen any reason to doubt Jamari Harris's ability to defend out in space.
He was picked on in previous years, but this year he's proven to,
So is every young corner, right? I mean, somebody brought up Riley Moss earlier. He's starting for the Broncos, but he was picked on early in his career. TJ Hall was picked on. By the way, I'm not throwing the towel in on TJ Hall, and I don't think Iowa is either. There's a reason why he ascended and he beat out all those other guys that were competing for that one spot. So,
and he's got a good head on his shoulders. I think he'll make the corrections and continue to increase his buffer there and not bite. So that's that. Well, then you have the offensive side, and I'm going to name drop because we got Don here and I got a name drop. So I think back to quote unquote possession receivers. And I think that we have the makings of a key possession receiver in Jacob Gill. And you've got to have that for consistency in your offense. And, I think back to what Billy Happel, Dave Moritz,
Scott Helverson, John Falloon.
Yes. And
to name a few.
I mean, I don't have the statistics on how many drops those guys had, but you could probably count them on one hand.
Yeah, they didn't drop.
And, now, previous years, we've been playing dodgeball. We've been beaning our receivers missiles. And so we're throwing hopefully a little more catchable ball. At least the miles per hour is dropped down a bit. But, so I guess to me, Don, my question to you is, the greatest Iowa offense ever was back in the Chuck Long era. Number one, that O-line, what do we need to do? When Chuck Long was quarterback, he'd pop himself 3 bags of popcorn, and he'd sit back there and empty a couple bags of popcorn, and then he'd start eyeing his receivers and making decisions on what he wanted to do. My point is that O-line gave him, I think 6 seconds to throw that ball.
What helped a lot is we avoided 3rd and long a lot. We ran the ball effectively on early downs. if we got into the long yardage, we still had good pass protection because the guy teaching pass pro is one of the best. His name's Kirk Fitz. And of course, our guys understood the pass concepts, and Chuck almost always made the right choice and threw with accuracy. Although he didn't have a cannon for an arm, as you know, but he got the ball on target and got it there on time. And our guys didn't drop, so that gave us a chance to still be an efficient offense.
And you look at, okay, so what to have a successful passing offense? Obviously, the run plays a part. Well, we've got the running game to draw guys up. Okay, we may have the makings of a possession receiver in a Jacob Gill.
Right.
And then, back in the day, you had Quinn Early, you had Robert Smith.
We still had guys that could get open deep.
Taking the top off. So, my question is, to me, it's two things on our pass offense. Number one is getting a little bit better pass protection. Our run blocking is great, but our pass protection is a little bit suspect. What needs to happen? Tactically, schematically needs to happen. Seems like we always get somebody coming free. And then second question is, who's going to be that guy to take the top off? Is it going to be a Caden Weegan? Is it going to be a Kaleb Brown? But we do have to present that threat. But to me, it just seems like teams tee off on us when it's a passing down. They line up and they tee off on us, and we're
kind of like we do to them.
Yeah, but we criticize Cade for throwing the check down. Well, that's the only thing he's got time for. So how can we give Cade more time so that we can get some guys downfield? And that's my question: is what are the tactics that can be utilized to enhance the blocking of that offensive line? And then, secondly is to get a guy open downfield. It just seems like, we get guys downfield, but they're covered up. How do you get them,
Well, it depends on the coverage. You have to find the weak spot in the coverage and exploit that. One thing that does come to mind for me, before we beat ourselves up too much, critical downs, we were 7 for 13 yesterday, 54%. That's compared to this 33%. And I do remember any number of them were 3rd and long or 3rd and 7, 8. That's still long. We say short is 1, 2, 3. Medium is 4, 5, 6. And then long is 7 or more. So I know we converted several times on 3rd and long. It was good to see because it required Kade to stand in there and make a good throw to a guy that was actually open. And I don't remember all the specifics of which ones were. We converted 7 out of 13. I'm guessing at least 5 of them were passes. Here's one misconception. Sometimes people think you have to throw the ball beyond the chains. That's not really true. Somewhere near the chains, but what's key is throw them the ball when they have a chance to run out with the football. Simple example, a slant route gives you a chance to pick up yards after the catch better than an out route or a stop route. So a slant route does give you a chance to convert on 3rd and 10. You still got to have a little bit of a void there when you catch a slant. But against cover 2, it's entirely possible you catch a slant and you catch it at 7 or 8 and you fall forward to gain 11 or 12. Yeah. So you don't have to throw it beyond the chains at all times. But if not, you need to be sure the guy has a chance to advance the ball beyond the necessary yardage.
And to go with my question, and guys teeing off on us, you think about Iowa's greatest games in recent years, and you have the screen pass to Akram Wadley against Michigan, where he just ate them up with with his run after the catch on the screens to Wadley. You have now you do have that one-off Ohio State game where it was, 55-24. But you have there's several games where you have these defenses that are teeing off, and we utilize the running back and we just drag him out of the backfield and kick it over to him, and it seems so effective. We also had the jailbreak screen that was more of a Mo Brown or a wide receiver coming more towards the center of the field,
Right.
not so much out on the outside like we do right now. I guess that's my question is, you're not the OC here, but it just seems to me like, where is the running back screen pass? And why is that not an option in this offense? Why wouldn't that be a good option with these teams that over pursue? I never see a screen pass to the running back. And these teams that really flow to the ball and attack the quarterback and they're teeing off on guys. People try to run the reverse, and that seems to not work. But it just seems like some of our most effective offensive performances have involved the screen pass to the running back against Michigan.
Well, one thing that needs to be taught seems to me in general when we run screens, Corey, it seems like our linemen sometimes do not understand and make the mistake of running too far downfield. Well, obviously, when they recognize it's a screen, they're attacking the ball. So the mistake a lot of linemen make, they don't come right down the line. They make the mistake of being a little too far downfield, and then they never can quite get to the defender. So obviously, the ball's got to fit up inside those O-linemen. And the problem we run into is sometimes the ball is not able to get back inside of our offensive linemen, in part because they're a little too far down the field. And they're getting beat underneath, if you know what I mean. You're getting beat toward the ball.
And I do wonder, in answer to Corey's question, the screen game, personnel-wise, I don't know. I just feel like perhaps as good as Kaleb Johnson has been this season so far, he may not be the ideal screen guy. I mean, he's paralleling Akram Wadley. So maybe now that Jazz Patterson's back, LaShawn Williams hasn't looked himself. I know he was recovering from a soft tissue injury, so maybe you get those guys back. That will be something that can be worked into the game plan. I'd like to see Terrell Washington out of the backfield a little bit more in some different places, Don. He caught his first pass on Saturday, but I'd like to see him maybe get involved in the screen game. Erica wants to know about Lester not calling as much motion as before. Have you noticed that, Don?
I haven't charted it. I don't know how it compares from one half to the next. In general, you need to have a reason to run motion, and because sometimes it gives you a distinct advantage. I'll give you an example. Remember when we lined up in what I call a bunch formation, 3 receivers on one side of the ball, all close to the tackle. Remember what we did? A time or two, we motioned. I believe he was in the number 3 spot. I'm sure he was, because typically the point man is the middle guy, right? And number 5, Gill, was an inside receiver who motioned, short motion outside. And you remember what we did? We threw a simple out route to him. But what that allowed the point man to do is to come off vertically with just a little bit of width maybe. And effectively it was a rub route. Remember that? The flat defender was caught underneath our inside receiver, our middle receiver. In the meantime, we got an unmolested out throw. And that Gill was the beneficiary of that, I think, 3 times. Easy yardage, just pitch and catch. Now, we can't wear it out because obviously if you do it too many times, they might have a plan for you. And maybe it involves that short motion requiring that corner to roll up. And they'll be in position to maybe even take the ball from you. So, but it worked, I believe, 3 times in the game. All 3 times it worked just fine.
All right. Thank you, Erica. And we are heading to our final caller of the night. Appreciate everybody being here. We just hit the 2-hour mark, so we are going to wrap this up. If I didn't get to your chat, I apologize. I've obviously got to prioritize the super chats, and we have a limited amount of time. So please come back. Try to throw a super chat up there if you can next time. If not, we hope to get to your comment or your question for Coach Patterson. Before we get to our final caller of the night, I did promise that I would share this website, folks. If you've not already been to rtithreads.com, this is their NIL portion of their website. So, again, this is rtithreads.com. Click on NIL athletes up here at the top, and you can actually browse by sport. But here is their entire NIL division, and take a look at this great list of Hawkeyes, including some basketball players like Owen Freeman, Josh Dix. But how about some football players like Zach Lutmer, Jacob Gill, and Aaron Graves? Check it all out and maybe shop some Cooper DeJean apparel on his official website, cd3lacesup.com. But again, all can be found at rtithreads.com. Again, that's rtithreads.com. Also, if you have not checked out our sponsor website, Ascent Nutrition, I've been plugging them. Ascent has been with us for, well, it's been, I think, 3 years now. And the more I have continued to learn about Ascent Nutrition, the more I'm impressed with what they're doing, because I know especially guys typically don't take as much of an interest in supplements and in nutrition. Of course, we all want to work out and stay healthy, but the benefits of having healthy products to rely on that are organic, that are natural, that you can trust, that have been tested and have stood the test of time. These products, specifically this awesome bundle that they're offering through this show from the Hawkeye of the Storm, their detox bundle, their humic and fulvic acid, their pine needle extract, they've shown to support healthy energy levels, gut health, brain health, and who doesn't need better clarity throughout the day? Their pine needle extract, it tastes great. For a limited time, you can get this bundle for 15% off. Check it out. Give it a try, folks, and see how you can start your ascent with Ascent Nutrition. And again, this is owned by an Iowa graduate, Lance Shuttler, a good friend of mine. It's a company with strong Iowa Hawkeye roots. And Lance is just concerned about making people's lives better, helping them feel better throughout their days. And again, strong Iowa roots. Great company. Again, we appreciate Ascent Nutrition. They've got a 90-day money-back guarantee. So, hey, if you don't like it, if you feel like you're not benefiting from it, simply contact them. They're great about their customer service and their relations. Again, go ascentnutrition.com and use the /Hawkeyes. The link is in our description. The code, folks, is Hawkeyes15. Hawkeyes15 over at goascentnutrition.com/Hawkeyes, or click the link in our description. All right, we've got our Iowa Smokehouse line. Our friend Crazy Joe DeVola is here. Welcome to the show, sir. Welcome back to the show, I should say.
Hi, guys. How are you?
We're good. How are you, sir?
I'm good. First of all, I want to say I don't know if Corey, I like having you for the full 4 hours. I don't know why, but I'm really, if you could somehow do the 4-hour thing, that would be really, really cool. So
okay. You want me for 4 hours? I got it. All right.
You're that good.
Can I just say something real quick? What I find humorous is the people, and it's the same trolls every time, but the people that complain about, you're always late, 5 minutes late, and then we're doing a 4-hour show or a 2-hour show. Like, give me a break.
No, well, just wanted to say that off the top. So I appreciate you being here, you guys. Something I wanted to clear up last time we talked about last week. I got a lot of heat for my comments, obviously from the from last week. I do want to have a little addendum to everything. After what I saw this week, I don't think this team's going to win 7 games. I just don't. I was really surprised at how the defense more reacted than the offense. And I think that's what most of my belief was before, was that we can have a damaged Cade, or we can have that sort of quarterback controversy, but we're always going to have that defense to kind of pull us out. And that really surprised me this week. And I think it's more than it's not just TJ Hall. There's something different there. I thought it was going to be the defensive line that was a little iffy, but that back end is pretty scary. And it changed my whole opinion on everything. So if they decide to play Sullivan, go for it. Do what they can do to get wins, but I don't think that defense is going to carry us to many wins. That was a bad Troy team. Bad.
I'm not a betting man, and I'll never be a betting man, but I'm going to tell you this right now. I am as confident as I am with anything that Iowa will hit 7 wins.
Oh, maybe get 7.
Well, you just said you don't think they're going to get 7 wins. You said
I said if they get 7 wins, that would be a big winning season for me with this defense. I was surprised. I didn't think the defense.
Did you hear the stat earlier though that Don brought up about in non-conference play last year in 3 games they gave up 7 explosive plays, and the rest of the season they gave up only 13?
I didn't hear that, but I just didn't get a good. This is more about just a gut reaction watching the game. I just didn't like the defensive vibe. I don't know what it is, and it's always been that. And another thing too, to kind of put on top of that, we can't really rely on the punting game anymore to really help with that with the defense. So that was another thing that I'm like, okay, well, we don't really have that great of we don't have Torrey again. So that isn't going to be, the second coming of Torrey. This guy may get there eventually, but those 2 things always bailed us out when the offense wasn't there. And hey, I
thought he was pretty good in the second. I thought Dakin maybe flipped a switch in the second half. He was a lot better in the second half Saturday than he was in the first.
Yeah, definitely. Just not the consistency thing. And I think that's what it is. It just kind of made me recalibrate everything and go, okay, well, now this maybe makes sense of why we play Sullivan maybe a little earlier than I thought, because we don't really have the defense or maybe the special teams that are going to maybe bail us out. Now it may be going to be the offense that bails out the team, which I thought I'd never say, but it may be that way. So, made me do a lot of thinking on that. So hopefully I'm wrong, but Minnesota might be. This is a real scary game.
It's an important game.
Yeah.
The first road game, it's to get Floyd back. It's the game responding to what happened with the Cooper DeJean thing last year. And I think the other part of this that we got to realize, I brought this up last night when I called in to show with you and Kyle, Don, but you have this game, then you get a bye, then you get Ohio State. So most people expect Iowa to lose to Ohio State. It is so important that Iowa wins this weekend, because if you lose this weekend, you're almost playing yourself out of any playoff conversation, because 3 wins, 3 losses, you're done. And so we expect them to lose to Ohio State. You win this weekend, then you get another week of off. You prep, you clean some things up. Even if you lose to Ohio State, you're going into the Washington game with just 2 losses and still alive. Whether people agree with that or not, they will still be alive with 2 losses. And they'd be alive for potential Big Ten championship game consideration, because the schedule is very favorable, and one of their 2 losses would have been out of conference. So, it is very important. And I just think timing-wise, challenge in a rivalry game, it's a challenge that's on the road, happens to be at night. That's probably not to Iowa's advantage. It's their first real road game. It's a big game.
Yeah, this is going to be a real. This is so 7-8 wins. That's what I'm going to go with. Okay. Let's see what happens. But yeah, Minnesota, this is going to be a little weird. I didn't think Troy was going to. Can we get that quarterback? I like that Troy quarterback. Who is that guy? Can we get that guy?
They played 3 quarterbacks.
Well, I don't know. The
guy
one
that started the game was the backup.
Oh my goodness, are you serious?
He never entered the lineup because the starter got injured. And then the one that threw the last touchdown pass, a nice ball incidentally, he was the number 3 quarterback just last week.
Okay, now that makes me even more nervous. I didn't even know that. So, okay, there. Now, 7-8 wins. This is it. This is going to be our tops, because if that was their backups doing what they did to the defense, that's even more cause for concern. But anyway, I'll let you guys go, but hopefully we'll reconvene next week, and I'm totally wrong, but good to see you guys. You guys have a safe week, and go Hawks.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the phone call. All right. Let's go to our last Iowa Smokehouse caller of the night, and then we'll kind of finish off with some final words on Minnesota. We got Midwest Storm Chasing here. Good to see you, sir. I saw you guys. I thought you giving a big thumbs down and shaking your head at that last caller. So
yeah, I didn't agree with about it. I didn't agree with about anything he said. No, and So I might be asking the same questions you guys already answered. I just got here. Long night. So we talked 2 weeks ago, the Iowa State game, the punter situation, how they had 2 punters, one for short, one for long. Why in the world do we have a goal line quarterback and midfield quarterback? I didn't need help. You got to explain this.
I think a little bit different given punter is such a my point in criticizing the 2 punter thing. Well, first of all, part of that was just I wanted to rip into our friend Levi. The other part of that was to me, punting is such a specific skill set. And I'm not saying there's not a lot involved, but it's kind of like being a long snapper or being a holder. Like you kind of have one job, and in punter's case, maybe, you have a couple jobs usually, whether it be pinning inside the 20 or just booting it as far as you can, direction, whatever. Quarterback, there's a lot more involved. So I have less of a problem playing multiple quarterbacks. You don't play multiple punters.
Right. Well, I'm not even like, I was happy to see Sullivan in, but I just don't, I mean, why? I just want, like, what's the reason for having him at the goal line?
They obviously didn't like what they saw against Iowa State at the goal line.
Right. They couldn't do anything at the goal line.
And that was their chess move. Don?
You're working with a small field. The players can gang up, the defenders can gang up near the football, except what you can do to give yourself one more dimension to your offense is involve the quarterback as a runner.
Yeah, Don.
That's why people do it.
I know. Steve in the chat brings up how Hayden had 2 punters on a number of occasions. I just think it's ridiculous. I think if you have a good enough punter, he ought to be able to do both.
Right.
That's my opinion. Like Tory Taylor. I know not everybody can be Tory Taylor, but it's kind of like having 2 place kickers. Like get a good place kicker, and the good ones can do it both. The good ones are good from 30 and inside, and they're good from 50 plus.
Right.
I thought our punter did great.
Well,
except for that one that was returned 77 yards, because some of that was on him.
And you could see when he got. I don't know if you noticed that, Don, on tape, but he was down, and you could tell he knew. As soon as he hit the ground on that return, he knew it was on him. Listen, James brought up criticizing Zach Lutmer and whatnot. They have good gunners, and I'm not taking away from Cooper DeJean as a gunner, but part of the reason Cooper DeJean was so good as a gunner is because he had Tory Taylor punting the football every time. That's part of the reason, and vice versa. Part of the reason Tory Taylor they had a really good gunner. They've got good gunners. Zach Lutmer is a good cover guy. John Nestor is a good cover guy. Devin Hilson has proven to be a good cover guy. Right now, they just got to get a little bit more consistency with hang time and for that matter, distance as a whole. Right, Don? He'll get that. Yeah. We know he's capable.
There were a couple of punts that he had into a slight south breeze, incidentally. They were 50 yards with good hang time. Beautiful punts. As good as anything Tory Taylor would hit or Reggie Roby for that matter. They look like Reggie Roby punts. The ball's nice and high. It's up there a long time. They have no choice but to fair catch it.
That was second half. You're talking about yesterday.
Yeah. But the one that got returned is the ball was in the air. I said, that's a returner. And the guy sitting nearby said, what's a returner? I said, it's a ball that's line drive down the field, then invariably comes right back at you. That's why it's a returner.
Hold on a second. You had this whole conversation while the punt was in the air.
No, I just said that's a returner. And after the return, he said, what's a returner? I said, it's a line drive punt because it's coming back at you. Get ready. You're going to pay for it.
Anything else, Midwest Storm Chase?
Yeah.
What's your first name? Can I call you by your I don't want to.
Yeah, Chase.
Okay,
Chase.
I'm not going to call you Midwest Storm Chase.
Yeah. No, I should change it, honestly.
You're fine.
So Cade's on his graduate year, right?
Yes.
And then, so does that mean that Brennan still or is it Brennan or Brendan?
Brendan.
Okay. Does he have? So he only has one more year.
Correct.
I didn't know if he'd get, because I know he's a junior, and the next year will be a senior, but I didn't know if he'd get a graduate.
What do you mean by a graduate? He already.
Okay, so he's all right.
He's not.
That stuff's so confusing to me.
Well, it's not really now that COVID's gone. The COVID year screwed everything up with trying to figure it all out. But
Brennan's in his 4th year right now, right? He's got a 4th year and a 5th year.
That's
Is that right?
so. Yeah, he redshirted at Northwestern, I think, year 1, and so he's playing this. Regardless if he plays, he couldn't redshirt this year anyways. So,
Gotcha. And then 7 wins this year. That guy was way off. I 9 or 10. Yes, with that I'd be all right.
I still think that. Listen, I still think they get to 10.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then I felt terrible for TJ Hall. That poor guy. He couldn't do nothing right.
Well,
you must be blaming him for both those touchdown passes.
I'm not blaming him for nothing. I just said I felt bad for him.
Have you listened to the show? One was his fault, one was not.
Well, I just, like I said, just got here.
You just got here, Don.
Okay.
Yeah, I missed so much. We were out in the fields late tonight. That's why I wasn't even going to call in because I didn't want to make myself look stupid. But
the last touchdown pass was the fault of the safety, not the corner.
Gotcha. What about was that the same with Wampa then last week? Iowa and Iowa State then? Was that Jay Higgins' fault?
Higgins is just trying to help out a teammate. That responsibility for sure is on Wampa.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that's all I need. That's all I wanted, fellas. Have a good night.
All right, Chase. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the call. Stay safe out in the fields. Don, Iowa, Minnesota, rivalry game. I didn't think we'd go 2.5 hours tonight, but somehow we're here. I know Eric had a super chat earlier, wanted to know about what you thought about this game. I know you have respect for PJ Fleck. I don't think he rubs Kirk Ferentz the right way. He doesn't rub me the right way either. This is an important game. We don't have to remind people what happened a year ago when Minnesota came to town and the Cooper DeJean thing. So that's got to be in the back of the minds of all these players, especially the coaching staff, I would think, even though they'll never admit that. Getting the pig back is important. That's something that should be talked about and will be talked about. But what are your keys heading into this game? We talked about Minnesota's defense. Offensively, they have struggled, and I can pull up some stats that kind of prove that. But the little bit of Minnesota that I've watched this year, I was not impressed with them offensively. But, hey, if they can make it difficult on Kaleb Johnson, Iowa, you could argue, has been zero-dimensional on offense for the last 3 years at least. They are one-dimensional right now. I mean, we have not seen enough consistency with the passing attack, but they are running the ball well. So the question to me is, can Minnesota slow down Kaleb Johnson? Because so far, teams are 0 for 3 in that category.
Right. I think priority number 1 to beat Minnesota is to eliminate the home run plays. That's number 1. And I would even say explosive plays are okay if they're just 20 to 29 yards. But we got to eliminate the super explosive. That's 30 or more. And those are the plays that are killing us, of course, is the ones that go more than half the field. So we got to eliminate those. If we can play all day without giving up a single super explosive play, I think we'll win the game. And that's a realistic goal. And that even allows for a few plays in the 20s. We don't like those either, of course. And again, in 10 games last year, we gave up a total of 13. There were even more than 20. Most of those, incidentally, were from 20 to 29. We had 4 super explosive plays in 10 games last year. 4 plays that were 30 or more. That's amazing. That's the best number I've seen in the Big Ten in all the years I've done this stuff. So is it a realistic goal that we can eliminate super explosive plays? Absolutely. We can do that. We just have to be smart about how we line up and how we play.
Minnesota's 97th in the country in total offense. And we talked, I know preseason, I think you and I chatted about, well, I know we chatted about the schedule. And when this game fell on the schedule, I believe it's pronounced Max Brosmer, the New Hampshire transfer. What have you seen out of him, Don? I was not particularly impressed, but his numbers are pretty good. He's thrown for about 69%, 8.1 yards per, I believe this is yards per attempt.
Yep.
And he's only got 3 touchdowns, just 1 INT. He looked to me when I watched him against North Carolina to be a game manager.
Right.
When you look at him in New Hampshire, he's throwing for all kinds of records, right? And he's
right.
Back different system.
They were also setting records for how many times they threw the ball in New Hampshire.
Exactly.
It was a very pass-oriented offense.
Totally opposite at Minnesota. So what have you seen from him, and what challenges do they present to the Iowa DBs in the very critical week to clean up those big mistakes?
The only game I've seen was the Carolina game. And I thought in that game, they didn't give him too much to do. They wanted to be sure that the moment was not too big for him. So they didn't ask him to do a lot. I think based on what I read, it seemed like he was gaining some confidence with how he could play in the Nevada game. I know his numbers were pretty darn good. Can't remember what they were, but he was at least 70% or maybe a little higher completion percentage.
16 and he was 16 and 26 for $191, a touchdown and a pick.
Yeah, and incidentally, they had at least 3 picks on defense, didn't they? I believe they had 3 for sure.
Minnesota had 3 interceptions, correct?
Yeah, I did read somewhere that the strength of their defense is for sure their safeties. So I think they have more than a couple of good safeties. I think they've even played some other safeties that showed a lot of promise too.
And for that matter, somewhat reminiscent, somebody asked us earlier, of Iowa State, as far as strength of the defense, was the back end of those safeties, which Iowa State gave Iowa fits in that second half. Well, really the whole game, maybe exception being the first quarter at times, but we know how bad Kade's numbers were quarters 2, 3, and 4 in the Cyhawk game. So
one thing I did notice also, based on the game against Nevada, that place kicker had a 52-yarder, I believe, in that game. It was the 5th field goal he's made of more than 50 or more yards. So he's got a big leg. I don't know what his percentages are over the years and all that. I don't know how long he's been a kicker, but he does have the capacity to kick long field goals, as does Drew, of course. So I'd say maybe the place kicker is a wash. I think we have a good one, and so do they. I think it's going to come down to eliminating big plays on the part of their offense and finding a way to have some kind of edge in terms of turnovers. I think that'll go a long way.
Next Saturday, NBC, 6:30 p.m. Central Time for the kick. Hawkeyes and Gophers battle for the Floyd of Rosedale. I'll be coming out with some pre-game coverage, preview, and, of course, my score prediction later in the week. And then next Saturday night, it will be Iowa postgame with Coach Don Patterson. Don, you and I are finally going to get to do – well, we did a show last week after the Iowa State game. That was not a good day. But you and I hopefully are going to be recapping a Hawkeye rivalry win next Saturday night. And are you ready for a late night, Don?
Yes. And just so you know how this works, I'm going to be taking notes during the game, of course. And I actually have a chance to back the TV up as well because I can fast forward through the commercials and catch back up. So here's my commitment to you, Corey. When the game's over, I'll be ready. We can go on shortly after the final seconds are ticked off.
Absolutely. Game should be done by about 10 p.m. So
no later than 10. Shouldn't run more than 3.5 hours, certainly.
Yeah.
The way these teams like to play, it might be not much over 3 hours.
Yeah. Iowa, Minnesota next Saturday, 6:30 p.m. Central Time, and post-game coverage with myself and Coach Patterson to follow. Don, it's a pleasure as always. Thank you for taking the time, double dose this weekend. Can't miss my couple hours with Coach Patterson on a post-game coverage after an Iowa Hawkeye win. So, Don, thank you for being here on this Sunday. Get some rest this week. I know Kyle tells me you've been on the golf course basically every week here in the last month or two. So sometimes multiple times per week, Don.
I may miss this week because I see a lot of weekday highs in the mid-80s or even higher.
Be warm.
I might have to sit out this week.
It's a good week to go north to play in Minneapolis. I don't know what the forecast is supposed to be, but
good point.
Going north's not a bad thing.
I think I saw a chance of rain here on Saturday, but hopefully the rain will be out of the Twin Cities by then. I would suspect it'll be passing through on Friday night, maybe.
All right, folks, for Coach Don Patterson, I'm Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm, Iowa postgame with Coach Patterson. We'll talk to you next Saturday. Have a great week.